presenter Philip Schofield faces fierce backlash after announcing his shock return to television.
Experts warn weight loss drugs are becoming available on the black market, with reports the likes of Ozempic are being sold in car parks.
This morning we debate whether all school lunches should be vegan. That's after a green energy tycoon called on the government to ban meat and dairy in schools.
Now it's revealed that 3/4 of women footballers think opportunities are greater for their male counterparts. Former Lioness Carly Telford joins breakfast later on this morning to discuss. And in the sport, 2 Carabao Cup games last night that both ended 5-1 as Arsenal beat Bolton and Liverpool beat West Ham. Manchester United only managed to draw with FC Twente from Eskilstuna. Just wanted to say that. And in sailing, it's the first race in the Louis Vuitton Cup between GB and Italy for the chance to race New Zealand in the America's Cup, which we haven't won since it began in 1851.
It's been a very wet week and there is further heavy rain to come today and tomorrow. Further Met Office warnings are in place. Join me later for all the details.
It's just gone 6 o'clock. I'm Stephen Dixon.
I'm Ellie Costello and this is GB News Breakfast. Well, thank goodness you're back. I've missed you so much.
Have you really?
You can never do that to me again. It was an awful long time. How long were you away for? 2 weeks? 3 weeks?
2 weeks.
No, it was an awful long time.
2
But
weeks.
then there was the week before. You know, after.
Yeah. Oh, that's when you were off.
Yeah. So it's been horrible
Oh, well.
without you. I
nice
missed
to be
you.
back.
I'm sure your replacements will be over the moon to hear.
They will.
to hear that.
Well,
No, they were lovely, just to say, but I did miss you.
thank you very much.
And you're very tanned.
And I've had a message, actually, from Eurovision legend Nikki French.
Yeah.
Who's watching this morning.
Hi,
She's
Nikki.
coming back as well. Morning, Nikki. She's got a great new song out at the minute, which is my permanent
Oh, you're still
earworm.
listening to that all the time?
One.
Yeah, he listens to it all the time. He's obsessed. Yes, carry on.
Totally
what she
obsessed.
said.
Anyway, she just said, welcome back.
Oh.
Thanks, Nikki.
And she also says you're looking great,
Thank
which you are because you're very tanned.
I've got a tan.
So you had a lovely time.
It's very hot, and then driven to work this morning, and it is pouring down out there.
It's always the way, isn't it?
Absolutely dreadful.
How was your 3 o'clock alarm this morning? Not good.
Let's not talk about it.
Well,
What have you got?
at least you had a better holiday than Roland Cherry, who's been in Zambia.
Who's Roland Cherry?
He's a British tourist who's been in Zambia on a safari holiday with his wife, Shirley.
Oh,
they were in a
nice.
canoe, having a little trip down a river in a canoe, just the two of them, very romantic, when it was hit by a hippo. The hippo landed on top of them in this canoe, dragged Mr. Cherry into the water, dislocated his shoulder, dragged him down to the bottom of this river, and then threw him into the air, and Mr. Cherry managed to scramble to safety.
Surviving
So
it.
he's only got a little gash on his leg. Amazing, isn't it? But
I'm completely stunned.
most people don't survive hippo attacks.
No,
that's
absolutely
amazing.
not. So did the hippo take pity on him then, Ellie? Is that what it was?
Well, he
or
flung
was
him
he
into
just
the
playing
air,
with
so
him?
perhaps that was... Maybe he was just playing with him. I'm not sure. But he's described it as a brush with death.
Cool, I should say it is.
But he's OK, believe it or not. Yep, and he's back home.
What did the wife
at
do?
home.
Was she paddling away in the opposite direction at great speeds? Or did she go in to try and save him?
It doesn't actually say what Shirley was up to.
Okay, yeah.
Oh, I remember hearing Shirley...
Oh, yeah. No.
I remember hearing Shirley calling my name and then lots of arms helping to drag me out of the water.
What, Roland?
There you go.
Roland?
Roland could remember.
It's a
Maybe
hippo.
he learnt the key tip, which weirdly enough I saw on YouTube this week,
Yeah.
that hippos like having their tongues stroked.
You're kidding me. Now that's good.
I wouldn't be putting my hand in a hippo's mouth, would you?
So, well, not voluntarily, no, but
Maybe that's what Roland was doing
stroke
then.
their tongues.
You know what I've never understood, though, is when you go to the... they have the displays, you know, with the fish and the dolphins and everything. With the dolphin, they always have the big toothbrush. Why do they always do the big toothbrush trick? The dolphin comes out, or the killer whale, and they get the big toothbrush and they pretend to... It's always the same thing.
I've never seen it.
Have you never seen the big toothbrush with the killer whales?
I've never been to that sort
Did
of
I
show.
dream this? I have a horrible feeling. OK.
Maybe.
OK.
Maybe that's what he needed. But anyway, they're back home now, and they're raising
Great
money.
anecdote, wasn't it?
They're raising money for the hospital where he was treated, and he hasn't even ruled out going to Africa in the future, saying we were there to see the natural world, but I didn't want to see it that close up.
No.
So there we are. That's
Scary.
Roland and his wife Shirley. But they're back home safe and
It's a
sound.
nice shot of them together, actually.
Great shot of the hippo as well. Don't know how they got that.
That might not be the...
Oh, do you not think so? OK, fine.
Anyway, scary stuff. So I'm glad you're back from holiday, and I'm glad you had a nice time in Roland.
A nice, yes, nice son, Roland. Sorry, Roland. Now, let's have a look at our top story for you this morning. And number 10 has admitted to releasing 37 prisoners by mistake, several of which have still not gone back to jail. The error happening in part at least, thanks to the government's controversial early release scheme.
Well, the Ministry of Justice claimed to be working in tandem with the police to urgently find those 5 inmates who are yet to be returned.
Well, that's as Labour is reportedly drawing up plans to introduce a Texas-style prison system with a points-based approach for good conduct.
The government will also look to invest in rehabilitation projects in a bid to curb overcrowding in prisons.
So is Labour really in control of law and order? Let's talk to our political correspondent, Olivia Utley. Morning, Olivia. I mean, this actually is a pretty big scandal because although it was the best option to release people early, that's what the Labour Party was saying at the time, the fact that people have been released by mistake is pretty grim.
Well, absolutely. And people were sort of predicting that something like this might happen because of the rush with which Labour carried out this plan. As you say, there was a necessity to do something. There was a point when there were only sort of 150 places left in male prisons across the whole country. But lots and lots of parole officers were warning back in August that the way that the government was fast-tracking the plan meant that there was a lot of room for people to sort of slip through the gaps, and that seems to be exactly what's happened. Whether this is all just a sort of, necessity thing is another question which I think is really interesting. Keir Starmer is sort of claiming that because the Conservatives left the prison sector in such a terrible state, he had no choice but to release some prisoners early. There is definitely a lot of truth in that, but it also must be said that his prisons minister, James Timpson, who set up Timpson's, the shoe repair and key-cutting shop that employs former prisoners, he fundamentally ideologically believes, and has said so multiple times on the record, that he believes that too many people are in prison. So there is also an ideological drive from Labour to get people out of prisons earlier. And I think that's playing into what they did back in early September with this early release scheme.
And they're now looking to Texas in terms of prison reform. It's a points-based system based on good behaviour. Tell us a bit more about that.
Yeah, so looking to Texas sounds a little bit alarming.
It does.
Obviously, Texas has quite a lot of people on death row. But it also has quite a liberal scheme, actually, to deal with its less serious offenders. So those who aren't violent offenders, haven't committed, crimes like murder, those people would be on death row. But those who've committed smaller offences are able to earn credit through going to drug rehabilitation programmes or going to agricultural school or doing various lessons in prison. They're able to earn credit, and that can buy them some time off their sentence. And ultimately, they only have to serve 25% of their time in prison. Now, Labour's early release scheme brought it down from 50% to 40%. This scheme will bring it down to 25%, and 25% could include some credits earned. So some people could end up spending actually very little time in prison at all.
That sounds very controversial, but I mean, is there evidence that it works from Texas in the sense that you are encouraging people to reform?
Well, it works in the sense that Texas had an enormous problem with massive, massive prison overcrowding, and that problem has lessened now. Whether it's helping people to reform, it's not really quite clear. It hasn't been going for long enough. You don't have the full picture of how it's worked in the round, but it has worked to tackle the immediate problem of overcrowding, and that for the government now is something that must be addressed really, really urgently.
Can we talk about Lord Ali's flat, who is the Labour donor? Because this isn't going away for the Labour Party, is it? And this is the latest revelation. It's the use of this £18 million penthouse by Sir Keir Starmer, not only during COVID lockdowns, but also in response to the late Queen Elizabeth's death, where he gave a message to the public. So let's just have a little clip.
The new variant, Omicron, is spreading fast, and the argument that we don't know enough about it doesn't stack up. We may not be certain how dangerous it is, but we do know that lives are at risk. At times like this, we must all put the national interest first and play by the rules. Getting jabbed, wearing masks, and working from home if we can really will help prevent infections.
And some accusing Sir Keir Starmer, of hoodwinking the public after, as you can see in that clip, using Lord Ali's apartment but putting his own family photos and Christmas cards in the background to make it look as though he was at home.
Well, it is all a little bit weird. We now know that Keir Starmer was using this £20 million penthouse in Covent Garden. He claims that he's been using it recently because his son needed some space to revise in peace over the election season for his GCSEs, although it doesn't seem actually the time doesn't seem to match up exactly. GCSE season and the time when the flat was being used aren't exactly the same. But now it has emerged that Keir Starmer was also recorded that message during the COVID lockdowns from Lord Ali's apartment. And as you say, he's made it look like his own house with pictures of his family behind him. Now, that could get him in trouble in terms of the lockdown rules, because working from home was allowed, but working from someone else's home is another question.
Oh, don't tell me we're gonna end up with basically another party gay in effect, or another flat sitting gay, or whatever. Surely not. God, you never know, do you?
No. There's questions. Yeah, and I mean, those excuses, the GCSE excuse, for example, I mean, that will fly with lots of people, but for others, it just doesn't add up.
No, and I think as we find out more about the exact timescale that the Starmers were using this flat will be quite interesting, because it does look as though actually GCSEs had hardly started before they stopped using the flat. And if that was the purpose, then why was his son not there for the duration of the GCSE period?
Lots of people have children doing GCSEs. They don't move into another house so that children have room to revise.
Well, he would say lots of children wouldn't have paparazzi and journalists outside the front door. That's his reasoning.
Yes, well, do you buy that? gbnews.com/your say. Let us know. Olivia, thank you very much indeed.
Thank
See
you,
you a little
Olivia.
bit later on. Now, world leaders have gathered at the United Nations in New York over fears of escalating tensions in the Middle East as Israel's army chief announced it's preparing for a ground offensive in Lebanon in an attempt to eliminate Hezbollah.
US President Joe Biden has voiced fears of an all-out war and called for a 21-day ceasefire as Sir Keir Starmer demanded a diplomatic solution to the conflict.
In relation to Lebanon, I'm very worried about the escalation and calling for all parties to step back from the brink to de-escalate. We need a ceasefire so this can be sorted out diplomatically.
Well, Lebanon's health ministry has reported 620 people have been killed by Israeli airstrikes so far, with a further 500,000 potentially displaced by the bombing campaign.
Well, our political editor, Christopher Hope, is in New York following the events at the United Nations Summit and brings us this report.
It's a huge day here in New York City for Sir Keir Starmer. Today he addresses the UN General Assembly. That's a big deal for any Prime Minister, but for him, really symbolic and important. The first Labour Prime Minister to address the UN for 15 years, and a chance for him to introduce himself to world leaders in the formal setting of the United Nations. Before that, he's got a business roundtable with senior players here in New York, maybe to encourage some of them to invest in UK PLC. Britain is open for business, he will tell the leaders of companies like Blackstone, Citigroup and Macquarie at a business roundtable. That comes after a busy time diplomatically. Yesterday, he was talking to President Zelensky from Ukraine, encouraging him in his battles with Russia to fight back against the invading troops, and also see whether the US and UK can support his plans to try and win that war and fight back against Russia once and for all. The clock is ticking on that because, as we know, we've got a change of government here in America. We might see Donald Trump replace Joe Biden or Kamala Harris. Either of those choices could lead to changes in US support for Ukraine, and that's why it's so important, I think, to get some agreement and some movement on that issue there as Ukraine fights against Russia. But none of that can obscure the problems that await him at home. He's got his battles with his own party about the controversial plan to withdraw the winter fuel payment from pensioners. 10 million of them upset. We've heard on GB News repeatedly about many are fearing for this winter. He had his own party voting against him in his party conference yesterday. And that is important. The first vote ever on this policy. Don't forget, this policy was not included in Labour's manifesto. And that's why it's so symbolic and so awkward for Sir Keir Starmer. Added to that, he's got a battle over freebies. His acceptance of thousands of pounds of new clothes, using a flat and the like. Again, it's dogging him. He can't quite escape that. Will he try and do something firm and deal with that? And also concerned about Sue Gray, his chief of staff. Not even 3 months into his time as Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer's finding out just how challenging it can be domestically when things come at you from left field you haven't been expecting, and here on the global stage, trying to construct various alliances to deal with issues facing the UK.
Well, let's head to Beirut. We can talk to foreign correspondent Hannah McCarthy. Good to see you this morning. I mean, what is the situation, Hannah, on the ground at the moment? What do we know?
Sure. Well, as you already said, there has been mass displacement over the last 5 days from South Lebanon and the eastern Bekaa Valley. Estimates range from 200,000 up to 500,000 who are displaced. Yet they're living in schools, they're living in relatives' homes. Some people are sleeping on the streets or on beaches in the south because they have nowhere safe to go. There's no shelters in Lebanon. There's none of the infrastructure that's available, for example, in Israel, or even a bit more in Ukraine, to protect people from airstrikes. So it's a very tense time for people. But we do have some signs that there's a diplomatic opening for a negotiation. We're hearing that on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly in New York that there are attempts to hammer out some sort of temporary ceasefire between Hezbollah and Israeli forces. We understand that the US is leading these negotiations, and they've said that this window will give some time to go back and work on the hostage deal and a ceasefire in Gaza. And I think that's interesting because what I think we saw from the pager attacks and some of the strikes on Hezbollah commanders was, I think, an attempt by Israel to wear down Hezbollah and maybe kind of decouple its support from Hamas. And I think the US has said, look, these are connected fronts and they're going to be dealing with these negotiations in a kind of joint way.
How likely do you think it is, Hannah, though, that we could step back from the brink with this? I mean, you're talking there about the calls from the UN, US, France, the Allies, talking about this 21-day truce. But it doesn't look as though Hezbollah or Israel want to step down from this.
Look, people often don't seem like they want to step back from war until a deal is made. We are kind of in uncharted territory in terms of the number of Hezbollah commanders that have been killed in such a short space of time, the damage they've experienced on their stockpiles of equipment, and also just the huge displacement that both countries are facing. And, you know, while both parties have shown a willingness to kind of inflict and absorb a significant amount of pain, both of them have large amounts of communities that want to return to their homes. And it's not sustainable for people to be away from their homes for that long. So there will be pressure from both parties to find some sort of way to save face. Both Netanyahu needs to save face here and Hassan Nasrallah. But what we saw in New York was Iran saying it was open to negotiations. And I think that's one of the big signs that these negotiations could be possible.
OK, Hannah McCarthy, really good to talk to you. Thank you. Now, members of the public, that's you and me, by the way, are up in arms after it was announced that Philip Schofield will be making a return to TV on Channel 5 and their new show, Castaway.
Yes, this morning's former host will make his first TV appearance in 16 months after details emerged that he had an affair with a younger colleague.
Well, let's have a look at the trailer.
I've been cast away on a desert island completely on my own. All I have is camera gear, and I can say whatever I want about whatever I want. It's my chance to tell my side of my story. I know what I did was unwise, but is it enough to absolutely destroy someone?
Well, we're joined in the studio now by presenter and commentator Danielle Mason. Good to see you this morning, Danielle.
And you.
What do you make of this?
So what I make of this, basically, he's took 16 months out. He stepped down from ITV. I actually said with Dawn Newsroom that we predicted that he was going to make a comeback, but we thought it was going to be ITV, I'm a Celebrity, but it turns out that it's Channel 5 Castaway. So we're going to see him on our screens, which will be Monday to Friday next week at 9 p.m. For an hour each. And I'm going to tune in. Are you two going to tune in?
I'm intrigued.
No.
You're not going to watch it.
No, I mean, look, the big question around this is, I mean, it's been kept very, very secret. He says he's having his say, but he signed a non-disclosure agreement with the young man involved in all of this, whose life appears to have been completely ruined as a result. So this is, I mean, legally, this is quite dodgy territory, isn't it?
Well, they've took away phones. There's no cast with him. It's literally just him on his own. He said he's got no food and water. So I'm quite intrigued to find out how he's going to go along with that. But talking about the young boy in question, they met when the boy was 15. I think Philip Schofield had gone to his drama school. So he was actually carving out his own career in the industry anyway, which is quite concerning because where has this boy gone? He was setting up his own career and it just seems that he's just been kind of silenced, if you like. We haven't heard anything from him, so it's not like he's been coming forward with his own story. It just seems to be... We heard Philip do the BBC interview, which was a very high-profile interview, and now we're seeing him go on this Channel 5 show, Castaway, which will be very raw material, and he'll have no one to manipulate what he says. And but the young boy, as we said, he hasn't actually spoken out, so he's having his story said again.
Yeah, I mean, you've got to think of him in all of this. I mean, Philip Schofield hasn't been found guilty of anything illegal, has he? And he does use that word unwise again, doesn't he?
So, he does say it's unwise but not an illegal affair. And when I put up something on social media, when I come in and spoke to Dawn about it, the reviews were very mixed. So the public seems to... A lot of people are disgraced by it, and then you have another half that wants to actually hear his side of the story. So I think it's kind of 50-50. I mean, I've seen people supporting him on his Instagram, Josie Gibson and other people from ITV.
That's interesting, because there's co-presenters, aren't they?
Yeah, and Vanessa Feltz actually spoke out yesterday, I think it was, saying she was delighted that he was going to have his say and hopefully he can put all this to bed.
Doubt it.
But we'll see. I mean, it starts on Monday, so we'll see. I'm going to tune in and I'm going to watch it because I just want to see what he's got to say, really.
What I'm intrigued by, you know, he's gay, and actually everyone in the business has known that for the past 30-odd years, apart from his wife, it would seem.
Yeah.
He's had this affair with this young man while he was still married. He's still wearing his wedding ring.
Is he?
Yeah.
Oh, do you know what? I didn't actually notice that. I'm not sure why he would be still wearing his wedding ring.
Which all sounds a bit odd, as they're wearing his wedding ring as he dishes all the dirt on why he slept with a young man at work. It seems a bit odd, doesn't it?
It does seem a bit odd, but maybe that's him trying to come across with this clean image. And, you know, we'll see. But, I mean... I've seen Declan has been out for dinner with him recently. So there are...
Anton Deck.
Yeah, Anton Deck. He's been out for dinner with him, and obviously Vanessa Feltz has been supporting, and there's been a few other people that I've seen supporting. But, I mean, a lot of the public... I know the Times reported that people had been saying, oh, I hope he's on a desert island with some lions and tigers, and... other people had just been saying that it was a bit of a disgrace. So it's a bit of a mixed review, but we'll see.
Yeah. OK, Danielle, thanks very much indeed.
Thank you very much. That's the question, isn't it? Can he be uncancelled, Philip Schofield? Let's know what you think.
I mean, I don't know. It's just... sometimes I just wonder with these people, when they've made a lot of money and there's a bit of scandal, why they just don't stop. I'll tell you what the big question for me is. Holly Willoughby.
Yes.
Because you remember they fell out and nobody knew why they fell out.
Yeah.
And then all this came out and she then said, but I don't know, I didn't know anything about this. Well, if that's the case, why did they fall out? No one's actually got to the bottom of that.
OK.
Just wondering.
Interesting.
That's all.
Maybe he'll reveal all on Castaway.
Maybe.
Well, let us know what you think. Can Philip Schofield be uncancelled? gbnews.com/yoursay.
Now, If you want to go to a desert island of your own, there's still plenty of time to grab a chance to win an incredible £36,000 in the Great British Giveaway.
Yeah, that's the next year's salary could be on us.
Could be.
Yeah,
sort of thing.
£36,000. Here's how you can make all of that tax-free cash yours.
You could be the next Great British Giveaway winner with a whopping £36,000 in tax-free cash in your bank account. Imagine getting the winning phone call for that.
The Britain I grew up in was the most peaceful, gentle society that has ever existed. That has been destroyed.
Opinion polls show immigration is the #1 concern to the British public. Are you proud to be British?
Yeah, I'm ever so proud.
My name is Stephen Edgington, and in this documentary, I want to find out how Britain became a nation of immigrants. Immigration, the truth, available at gbnews.com.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together and what have we got, in my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent? I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Your lunchtime update on the stories that matter across the UK.
From breaking news and insightful analysis, inspiring stories and lively debates. You're comparing yourself to a former Prime Minister.
Which is it? Stay informed, stay updated, stay entertained.
I just don't know how anyone would not want to be there.
Every weekday from midday.
We are Good Afternoon Britain, only on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to breakfast. Now, concerns are mounting that the popular weight loss drug Ozempic is being sold on the black market.
Well, the National Pharmacy Association have urged people to avoid buying weight loss injections over the internet. Let's be honest, you don't know what you're getting.
I mean, that is quite obvious, is it not? But research has also revealed that some online pharmacies have prescribed the drug without any regulation.
Well, let's talk to former midwife and weight management expert Piroska Cavell. Good to see you this morning. I mean, what do we think is going on with these weight loss drugs and how people are getting hold of them?
I think the problem is they've become so widely available. People are just scanning the internet, online pharmacies. It's very easy for people to access these medications with little or no knowledge about what these medications actually do. You know, people have been able to go online, and the problem is very much with people, for example, who've got a history of disordered eating. They don't have to tell the truth. I know of people who have photoshopped a photograph of themselves to enlarge their body shape. They have taken a photograph of scales, which is supposed to show their body weight, but actually what they have done is got their husband to stand on the other end of the scales to make their weight look much more than it actually is, and they've been able to access these drugs. So it's very easy for people to access this medication online, and they're not understanding the danger they're putting themselves in.
Because it is so dangerous, isn't it? I mean, it's alarming, some of the details here. We're talking and hearing about people buying Ozempic in car parks. I mean, people literally don't know what they're buying, do they? And injecting.
No, yeah, absolutely. They have no idea. Now, in the right hands, so in my clinic say in the Spencer Hospital, you come and see me. We do a complete one-to-one consultation all about your lifestyle, your eating habits. I find out everything about you that is going to influence your weight. Only then will I make a decision as to whether weight loss medications are appropriate for you. And then I monitor you all the way through the plan. And it's very important because these weight loss medications can drop your blood sugar. People are giving out these weight loss medications with absolutely zero understanding of insulin, glucose, all the different types of fat in your body. You have to really understand the processes of the body right down to the cellular level. And people are buying these drugs in the car park. The drive to want to lose weight is so strong.
And I guess part of the problem is as well, I mean, we know that it can make you feel very, very ill, very sick, a lot of these drugs. Presumably, if they're being administered correctly to the right people, that at least people are aware of that, and perhaps it's less likely to happen. Whereas if you're just buying it, you're just going to put in as much as you can get away with, aren't you, for quick results?
Yeah, and that's exactly what's been happening. So in the right hands, they are absolutely brilliant and they do exactly what they say. So you're able to help someone, for example, who has constant cravings, who can't manage, their thoughts about food. They want to eat all the time. You can help them reduce those cravings and build in some better habits. And then that's what's going to help them long term sustain their weight management. But people, will buy things online. I had a conversation with someone the other day. They had bought some online thinking it was the weight loss medications. It came in 2 unlabelled vials, absolutely no idea of what's in it at all, and a syringe. So people are literally just getting anything from the web and injecting it. And, and that is what the worry is.
Yes, do not do it. Really good to see you this morning, and great advice that you need to see experts when it comes to all of this. Thanks very much indeed.
OK, thank you.
It's terrifying. I understand why people think it's a quick fix. It's the magic bullet to sort it all out. But you've got to do it under medical supervision.
Yeah, absolutely do. Don't be buying anything online that you don't know what it is, and certainly don't be injecting it either. It's so risky, isn't it?
With these online pharmacies, though, you can tell them. I mean, they say it's all checked, but is it really? Is it properly checked? I don't know. You can tell them anything,
concerning, isn't it? Yeah, well, let us know what you think. gbnews.com/your say. Now, 35 minutes past 6. Let's have a look at the weather now with Alex Deacon.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Morning, welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office. Here on GB News, we are expecting the rain to cause further issues over the next day and a half. Further heavy rain today, tonight and tomorrow morning is expected to cause further flooding. Met Office warnings are in place. Check the Met Office website or app for full details. Particularly wet today over northeast England, parts of Northern Ireland, North Wales, also seeing some heavy downpours. And in the south, a bit more showery in nature. There'll be some brighter spells, but here too, some heavy downpours are likely. Much of Scotland looking dry, some sunny spells on the west coast. It's quite cool here. Temperatures elsewhere struggling in the mid-teens, feeling pretty chilly with that persistent rain and the winds coming in from the North Sea over northeast England and the far southeast of Scotland. Further south, we will see some sunny spells through the day, but there'll still be some heavy downpours around as the rain builds up here, particularly tonight and tomorrow. The potential for further flooding, a wet zone over North Wales and northern England. As I said, looking a little drier across the southwest of Scotland. A scattering of showers in northern Scotland with that northerly wind bringing a chill. The wet weather this morning should clear away from Northern Ireland, but likely to linger in North Wales, northern England well into this evening, and then we're looking at some heavier bursts of rain developing over the Midlands and southern England and South Wales as we go through the night. Because it's been so wet this week, that is likely to cause some further flooding issues through the night and first thing in the morning. Temperatures just about holding up in double figures tonight, but further north it is turning colder. The northerly winds pushing the rain away, but also introducing a cooler feel. Some good spells of sunshine tomorrow over central and southern Scotland, a much brighter day over northeast England. The rain should also finally clear from southern parts after a wet start. So many areas becoming dry and bright by the afternoon, but also noticeably fresher with the winds coming down from the north. A distinctly cooler feel with temperatures struggling to get into the mid-teens. Many places only 11 or 12 Celsius. Bye for now.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. In Tyne and Wear, the A188 is closed each way along Chillingham Road off the A193 Shields Road at Eton after an accident. In Bedfordshire, the A421 remains closed each way between the A6 and M1 near Bedford because of flooding. Buses replace trains between Bedford and Bletchley for emergency engineering works. In Swansea, the A483 Fabian Way is closed eastbound towards the port of Swansea at Port Tennant because of flooding. In London on the North Circular, it's down to a single lane westbound where there's flooding in the tunnel at the Crooked Billet Interchange at Walthamstow causing queues. In Kent, the A2 is closed eastbound from the Tollgate services at Gravesend to the M2 after an accident. There are queues towards there. And buses replace trains again today between Calstock and Gunnislake for emergency engineering work. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Patrick Christie's Tonight, weekdays from 9 p.m.
Richard, you know, the King will probably fly there, I would imagine, with the Queen. You can guarantee they'll have to make a point about offsetting their carbon just to keep that lot happy. They won't use the walkabout term because they'll have to keep the Aboriginal community happy over there. Obviously, they'll be fine that the Queen's face has now been taken off banknotes over there, replaced, I believe, by a member of the Aboriginal community, naturally. You know, you've got all of these tick boxes that the King and the royal family have to do, instead of just maybe, I don't know, leading, being there, being present. Why do they keep bowing down to this stuff?
Well, firstly, as I say, I mean, if you look at the Commonwealth, there are 56 countries. Now, I think that's an enormously important institution, and we benefit in all sorts of ways, as do the other countries who are members of it. Now, if you don't take account, with times changing, by the way, of course, as they did during Queen Elizabeth's reign, if you don't take account of various sensitivities, especially certain pressure groups, I'm not suggesting that we write off our history as being something that's dreadful. There are ups and downs and pluses and minuses, we all know that. But the point is to be sensitive to other cultures, and that is absolutely pivotal.
What we're seeing in the UK, a lot of these same issues do crop up in Australia, especially with freedom of speech and saying the wrong thing, getting cancelled. I've met with so many people who have personally, like, they've been deplatformed, lost their jobs just for having an opinion, just for potentially saying the wrong thing, and then losing their livelihood as a result. So with Australia, I think particularly this is the trend that we saw from 2020 with the lockdowns, especially in Melbourne, some of the harshest lockdown restrictions in the world. Now, Australia is known as being a country of freedom and liberty. So then I think for many Australians, it was a huge turning point, a big wake-up call.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Paul Coyte's here with all your sport at 6:40. Good morning.
Good morning.
What are we starting with?
Let's do a little football, shall we, first?
Oh, let's.
I've missed it. Arsenal beat Bolton 5-1 in the Carabao Cup last night. But when they say, they're putting the kids out, they really did put the kids out. I mean, these are basically children who were playing for Arsenal yesterday. So Ethan Nwaneri scored. He's 17 years old. He made his debut at 15. And the goalkeeper, Jack Porter, there's Jack there on the left, having it's like what you do with a kid. Oh, come on, son, do a bit of that. He? He's 16.
No.
He's 16 years, and whenever you get a young footballer, the days is always added, so he's 16 years and 72 days old. Wow. And there he is. And the thing is, I think to be an outfield player, and if you're a kid, and if you're a teenager, that's one thing because you can get involved. And if you make a mistake, then...
Not the end of the world.
It's not the end of the world. If you're a goalkeeper, the pressure on you is unbelievable.
I always think that must be the worst job.
Oh, without a doubt. Yeah, without a doubt. So if you're a 16-year-old and to go out and to have the nerve to be playing at the Emirates and to be able to do a good job and play as well as he did, I mean, that really takes some doing.
Yeah.
I mean,
so he's going to be a future star.
Well, you'd think so, but the thing is, often it's, you know, when you've got youngsters, they don't have that fear. I've spoken to footballers. I mean, for example, Paul Allen was the youngest player that ever played in a cup final. He played for West Ham when he was 17, and it was in the cup final back in 1980. And he said, you know, I had no fear. There was no problem. When he played in cup finals later, 10 years later, he said it was completely different because you think a lot more. Yeah. So maybe it's easier when you're younger, I don't know, but it's so impressive.
Good on him.
When was that you broadcasted? What, at 12? Was it the first time you hosted your first news show?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
No, I'll tell you what, I was 17, 18? 18 I must have been when I did my first news bulletin.
Right.
In radio.
And how did you feel? Were you nervous or were you just...
Terrified.
Well, yeah. I was
terrified.
I was like 20 and I'm actually still terrified now, and now I'm 34. Let's go to Liverpool, West Ham. That was 5-1 as well. Arne Slot is the manager. So I keep saying it's great for him because he's just walked in to be the manager of a ready-made team. It's just all ready for him. Usually managers will take over on losing teams, but certainly not with Liverpool. West Ham, not so good. And Julian Lopetegui, who's their manager, got a very nasty injury during the game because he was getting so upset. I think it was when the fourth or the fifth one went in. In a bit of a fit of pique, he stamped his foot on the ground and did a calf muscle. So it really is, quite frankly, insult to injury or injury to insult, isn't it, that one?
Can we have a quick word about Erik ten Hag and FC Twente?
FC Twente from Enschede. From Enschede. That's Erik ten Hag. That was his team. So he played for FC Twente. And the thing is, Twente have gone out there and played at Old Trafford, and you would think that, I mean, they're fourth in the Eredivisie, and you'd think that they would be just stamped all over, but Manchester United did not play as well as everybody wanted, and the fans were booing. I know, surprise, surprise. They thought it was going to be easy. Shall we hear from Erik ten Hag?
Oh, let's
hear from Erik. This is what Erik had to say.
That was the game of their life. They fought for every yard, and we didn't. And 99% is not enough. You have to give 100%. You have to kill the game. You have to finish it off.
I think he's being generous. 99%. I'd say probably 65% for Manchester United.
Walking, isn't it?
Yeah. You know, you'd think so because, well, the FA Cup that they won, that saved his bacon.
Yeah.
Well, it's not Danish bacon. He's Dutch, though, but that's not going to But anyway, so then he's gone, and then he started the season. They're not looking good. So how long he's going to last, I don't know. Spurs versus Karabag from... Do you know where they're from? Hey, guess where Karabag are from?
Prague.
No, they're from Azerbaijan.
Oh.
I know you're going to guess that next. And Karabag means black garden in Azerbaijan.
Oh, that's something else.
It sounds ominous.
It does sound ominous.
Okay,
It does, doesn't it?
Paul Coit, thank you very much.
We'll see you later on.
Thank you.
Get off.
Was it the Black Garden thing? Is that what it was? It was the Azerbaijan?
Finish me off.
Hook him off.
The Hollywood actress Dame Joan Collins has been speaking to GB News about her iconic career and gave her thoughts on the current political climate.
Yes, she sat down with Andrew Pearce. Here's a snippet.
Tell me about the modern world now. It's very fashionable now to call you all actors.
I don't call myself an actor.
You're an actor.
I call, if I'm in a room with some actors and actresses, I call us actors.
Right.
And I do sometimes call myself a jobbing actor, but on the whole, I like to be called an actress.
Yeah.
It's a very pretty word.
Yeah.
It's, and it's feminine, and I consider myself to be feminine and a feminist. And why should we be called female actors? I find it demeaning,
right.
frankly.
Yeah. A bit too... And do you think this wokery thing has got a bit too much of this wokery?
Good God, yes.
Yeah.
You know I do.
I do.
I think it's gone out of control.
Yeah.
Really. You can't say anything. People get offended.
Yeah.
We've lost our British sense of humour.
Right.
You know, I grew up with my father going to... Because he was an agent for variety halls. And so we would go and we would see outrageous comedians making... you know, jokes about their mother-in-law and fat people. You can't say that now. You can't say any of the stuff. So I grew up watching those from the age of 11 or 12. Daddy had all these different acts and things that he would do, and it was great fun. And then, of course, as soon as I went to Hollywood, there was Milton Berle, who was the most outrageous comedian and dressed up as a female, and was no way you could do any of that today. I think, you know, some of the things are fine, but I think we've lost our sense of humour tremendously, don't you?
I do, and I think
I'm so glad you still got it.
We have to push back at it, and as you know, sometimes I probably say the wrong thing. And
you get hate mail, don't you?
I do get hate mail, but that's fine, we don't mind that, we get used to it. This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
Please tell me that we're British. In our darkest hour, we can work around this. The beer will still be flowing at Christmas. Tell me, please.
Martin, without using bad language, there's no words to describe that this is another major blow to the hospitality sector. I wake up every day with anxiety thinking, what's going to happen to us now? Oh my God, now the weather's against us. Not only are the government absolutely battering us, then the weather's now hitting us as well.
Kate Stewart, this can only mean one thing. Prices, once again, going through the roof.
And there's nothing we can do. We have on costs. We have to buy from the brewery. We have the VAT. We have then the VAT, what we take. It is an absolute nightmare. To be in the pub game now, Martin, is very, very difficult. And there's no light at the end of the tunnel. Everything just keeps hammering us from every different direction. And obviously, we have to pass that on to the customers, then price increases. There's nothing we can do. We don't want to sell beer at an inflated price. We want it as cheap as possible to get people through them doors. But we have no option. They're going to go up again in the new budget. You know, there's no help for us. What are we supposed to do, Martin, except the only option is to close the doors and say, enough is enough. We can't do this anymore. I absolutely cry my eyes out having to put the prices up because you think, oh, my God, people are just going to turn away and walk. But we can't swallow the costs all the time, Martin. It's impossible for us to do because we will go bankrupt. There has to be there's inflation getting hammered on us yet again, and we have to pass it on. I feel it when I take my children out for something to eat. You're like, wow, that has just cost a fortune. But what is the answer? The answer is the government needs to look at saving the hospitality sector and stop being so greedy in everything that they take away from us, or there won't be pubs.
GB News, the People's Channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get the book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Right, time for a look through the papers. It's only a quick one this hour, well, longer than the next. It's radio and TV presenter Pat Sharp and writer and journalist Emma Wolfe. Good morning to you both.
Morning.
Pat, let's kick off with you, should we? In the Times, looking at this points system for prisons.
Yes.
Points make prizes.
Points, I was going to say that, yeah. Good game. Hope you're playing this one at home. So basically, I think what it is, it comes from America, as most of our ideas tend to, I think, over the years. You'll notice, obviously, and you've obviously reported on this, and you guys at GB News, it's been all over the news, that a certain amount of prisoners were released incorrectly.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty alarming.
When you think how many times you have to show your ticket to get on a plane, to get through an airport, and yet you can actually, oh, I'll tell you what, yeah, you go, you stay, no, all right, no, you go as well, yeah, fine, I'll catch up with you later. I mean, it's just mind-boggling. So what they want to do is they want to, well, certainly release the correct amount of prisoners, and they want to have the prisons less overcrowded. So the Americans, many years ago in Texas, came up with an idea of giving prisoners points for good behaviour, and indeed going to lessons and learning things within the jail so that they could get an early release and free up spaces if they don't get released early wrongly.
Yeah. Well, that is particularly alarming because those that were released early, 37 of them in total, have been convicted of breaching restraining orders.
Yeah. Exactly.
So I just instantly think of the female victims who have these restraining orders out against these prisoners, and they've been released early.
It's very scary for a lot of women who are worried anyway about, you know, former partners who may have been violent being released anyway, even at the end of their term. So, I mean, this is... But, you know, the probation service, as you say, a few weeks ago, the probation service warned they were not fully prepared. They didn't have the time that they needed. I do think this point system is actually... It's a positive step. I do think that, you know, finally we're looking at what people do in prison and looking at rehabilitation and education and getting them to work and doing something. I just think it's crazy to expect that we shove prisoners into prison and then expect them to come out as reformed characters. We've got to do something with prisoners when they're inside.
Well, it worked in Texas. They closed 16 jails and saved an estimated $2 billion from this.
Guess what? Well. Guess what? Prisoners might get some training. They might get some skills. They might get some actual life kind of motivation to do something.
Yeah, well, if it's good, fine. We need to look at the details. We are tight for time. You can blame Joan Collins for that.
Blame me.
Emma, so let's have a quick look at this fantastic news that if you have children doing their GCSEs in the Daily Mail and they're finding it a bit stressful, it's fine. You can go and stay in an £18 million penthouse to give them a bit of space.
Absolutely shocking. Well, obviously, this is the furore over freebies. Well, I've given up on the gates, the freebie gate, the frock gate, all of this stuff. Now it's Covent Garden Penthouse Gate. The ongoing furore over these freebies, which I think pretty much overshadowed the entire Labour conference, which should have been a celebration, it should have been a sort of victory march, instead of which Keir Starmer's got mounting questions over what the heck is going on. Where was he? Why was he claiming that this penthouse, which was owned by Lord Alley, was being used for his son to revise in his GCSEs, as people are saying? There are libraries, there are quiet rooms in your very big house, mate. Why would your 16-year-old need a penthouse to revise in? The dates don't tally because the dates were actually longer than the actual GCSE period. Then he appears to have started filming COVID videos, lockdown videos from this penthouse and making out that it was possibly his family home.
It's all very odd. Sorry it's so short. We'll have longer next hour.
Not a problem.
Good to see you both.
Let's have a look at the weather.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Morning, welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office. Here on GB News, we are expecting the rain to cause further issues over the next day and a half. Further heavy rain today, tonight and tomorrow morning is expected to cause further flooding. Met Office warnings are in place. Check the Met Office website or app for full details. Particularly wet today over North East England, parts of Northern Ireland, North Wales, also seeing some heavy downpours. And in the south, a bit more showery in nature. There'll be some brighter spells, but here too, some heavy downpours are likely. Much of Scotland looking dry, some sunny spells on the west coast. It's quite cool here. Temperatures elsewhere struggling in the mid-teens, feeling pretty chilly with that persistent rain and the winds coming in from the North Sea over North East England and the far southeast of Scotland. Further south, we will see some sunny spells through the day, but there'll still be some heavy downpours around as the rain builds up here, particularly tonight and tomorrow. The potential for further flooding, a wet zone over North Wales and northern England. As I said, looking a little drier across the southwest of Scotland. A scattering of showers in northern Scotland with that northerly wind bringing a chill. The wet weather this morning should clear away from Northern Ireland, but likely to linger in North Wales, northern England well into this evening, and then we're looking at some heavier bursts of rain developing over the Midlands and southern England and South Wales as we go through the night. Because it's been so wet this week, that is likely to cause some further flooding issues through the night and first thing in the morning. Temperatures just about holding up in double figures tonight, but further north it is turning colder. The northerly winds pushing the rain away, but also introducing a cooler feel. Some good spells of sunshine tomorrow over central and southern Scotland. A much brighter day over northeast England. The rain should also finally clear from southern parts after a wet start. So many areas becoming dry and bright by the afternoon, but also noticeably fresher with the winds coming down from the north. A distinctly cooler feel with temperatures struggling to get into the mid-teens. Many places only 11 or 12 Celsius. Bye for now.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. In Tyne and Wear, the A188 is closed each way along Chillingham Road in Heaton after an accident. In Bedfordshire, the A421 remains closed each way between the A6 and M1 near Bedford because of flooding. On the M1 in Hertfordshire, the outside lanes closed southbound at Junction 8 at Hemel Hempstead after an accident. There are queues from Junction 10 at Luton Airport. In Swansea, the A483 Fabian Way is closed eastbound at Port Tennant towards the port of Swansea because of flooding. On the M25 in Essex, there are two lanes closed anti-clockwise at Junction 28 for the A12 after an accident, with queues from Junction 29 for the A127. And in Kent, the A2 is closed eastbound from Gravesend to the M2 at Strood after an accident. There are long delays towards there and as you divert. And the M2 is closed westbound at Junction 1 at Strood.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Desney, good luck.
Mark Dolan tonight is your weekend dose of news, debate and entertainment.
This sounds like a wild conspiracy theory.
Don't miss My Big Opinion, Mark Meets, and My Take at 10.
Democracy is a funny old thing.
And we don't do boring, not on my watch. I just won't have it.
Let's go and get another glass of that bubbly. You've earned it.
That's Mark Dolan tonight, Saturday and Sunday, 9 to 11, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Britain I grew up was the most peaceful, gentle society that has ever existed. That has been destroyed.
Opinion polls show immigration is the #1 concern to the British public. Are you proud to be British?
Yeah, I'm ever so proud.
My name is Stephen Edgington, and in this documentary, I want to find out how Britain became a nation of immigrants. Immigration, the truth. Available at gbnews.com.
Good morning to you. Dozens of prisoners mistakenly freed thanks to an error in the government's early release scheme.
One person understood to have already reoffended, 5 people still on the loose as the prison crisis deepens.
Well, that's as ministers scramble to avoid further overcrowding. The Justice Secretary apparently considering a points-based system to reduce an inmate's time behind bars.
The Prime Minister is in New York for the UN General Assembly, where top of the agenda is avoiding all-out war in the Middle East.
In relation to Lebanon, I'm very worried about the escalation and calling for all parties to step back from the brink to de-escalate. We need a ceasefire so this can be sorted out diplomatically.
As US officials say, a temporary ceasefire deal along the Israel-Lebanon border could come within hours.
Former chair of the 1922 committee, Lord Brady, celebrates the release of his much-anticipated memoir, Kingmaker. He'll be joining us on Breakfast later this morning.
Former presenter Philip Schofield faces a backlash after announcing a return to television.
We're going to debate whether all school lunches should be vegan. That's after a green energy tycoon called on the government to ban meat and dairy in schools.
It's been revealed that 3/4 of women footballers think opportunities are greater for their male counterparts. So we've got former Lioness Carly Telford joining us on Breakfast later to discuss. In other sport, 2 Carabao Cup games last night, both ended 5-1 as Arsenal beat Bolton and Liverpool beat West Ham. In the Europa League, Manchester United drew and got booed off. And in tennis, Barrett Safin has become the lowest-ranked player ever to win an ATP tournament.
It's been a very wet week and there is further heavy rain to come today and tomorrow. Further Met Office warnings are in place. Join me later for all the details.
Just gone 7 o'clock. I'm Stephen Dixon.
I'm Ellie Costello and this is GB News Breakfast.
Right, we are a bit tight for time, so we're going to crack straight on this hour. Number 10 has admitted to releasing 37 prisoners by mistake, several of whom, we should say, have not been returned to jail. The error blamed on problems with the government's controversial early release scheme.
Well, that's as Labour is reportedly drawing up plans to introduce a Texas-style prison system with a points-based approach for good behaviour.
Well, the government will also look to invest in rehabilitation projects in a bid to curb overcrowding in prisons.
So we're asking this morning, is Labour really in control of law and order? Let's speak now to our political correspondent, Olivia Utley. Good to see you this morning, Olivia. And concerning news, isn't it? There's 37 prisoners who've been let out of prison by mistake. And it's understood that they've been convicted of breaching restraining orders.
Well, very concerning news. There was a worry that something like this might happen because the early release scheme was actually activated so quickly. There were lots and lots of parole officers suggesting that there just simply wasn't enough time for prisons to get their ducks in a row in order to get those prisoners released for the 10th of September. You know, the Labour government felt that it had to do something about the prisons overcrowding problem, and you can see why. There was a point when there were only sort of 150 places left in male prisons across the country, and they did say that this early release scheme was their only option. I mean, whether that's the whole truth, I'm not quite so sure, because James Timpson, the new prisons minister, he is actually ideologically opposed to people spending too much time in prison. So I don't know if this policy was born out of purely necessity or out of ideology as well. And now the government is planning to go a step further. It's looking towards Texas for prison reform. Now, that sounds quite alarming because I think we think of Texas as the death penalty. But actually, it has quite a liberal scheme for dealing with prisoners who've committed lesser offences. And those prisoners are able to earn credits by going to drug rehabilitation groups, by going to educational school in prison, and they can earn credits and end up spending only 25% of their sentence, including credits earned in prison. Now, the early release scheme brought the default here in the UK down from 50% to 40%. This could bring it down still further.
Yeah. OK, Olivia, we'll speak to you a little bit more about that in the next hour, but for now, thanks very much indeed.
Thank you.
Let us know what you think, gbnews.com/yoursay. Rehabilitation is great. It's got to be done in prisons. What about the punishment aspect? That's got to be in there as well, hasn't it? You think?
Absolutely. Yep. Let us know what you think. gbnews.com/yoursay.
Now, world leaders have gathered at the UN in New York as fears grow for the Middle East after Israel's army chief announced plans for a ground offensive in Lebanon to eliminate Hezbollah. That's also renewed hopes of a ceasefire overnight, as US officials say a temporary peace deal. Amidst all that, sounds a bit contradictory, doesn't it? But they're saying that could be possible within hours.
Well, US President Joe Biden has voiced fears of an all-out war as Sir Keir Starmer demanded a diplomatic solution to the conflict.
In relation to Lebanon, I'm very worried about the escalation and calling for all parties to step back from the brink to de-escalate. We need a ceasefire so this can be sorted out diplomatically.
Well, let's talk to former chair of the Defence Select Committee and former Conservative MP Tobias Ellwood. Good to see you this morning. I mean, what's your assessment of where we are? I mean, talks of a possible ceasefire that could be in place within days. Israel certainly doesn't seem to be having any of it.
Yes, the talk and the action seem to be very different indeed. It does look like the Middle East is sliding towards another war. I'm sure that will be the case if Israel sends troops into southern Lebanon. Hassan Nasrallah, the Hezbollah's leader, miscalculated, ratcheting up support for Hamas in the first place by increasing those rockets attacks in the north of Israel, forcing 60,000 Israeli civilians to evacuate that area. That's triggered this huge response by Israel with the assassination of Fuad Shukra, Hezbollah's military chief, and of course those recent pager attacks that's crippled Hezbollah's communications, and now these missile strikes on Hezbollah's launch sites across southern Lebanon and the Bekaa Valley. And then the strikes on both sides, of course, have ratcheted up, hitting civilian areas, and that's where this conflict is now escalating, which has prompted this important call for a 21-day ceasefire by Britain and other world leaders meeting at the United Nations. But whether we'll get there, as you point out, all depends on whether those contributing to this are willing to sit down. And right now, it doesn't look like that's the case.
Well, it certainly doesn't, does it? When you hear from the Israelis yesterday telling Israeli soldiers that their boots are about to enter enemy territory, how close do you think we really are to a ground invasion into Lebanon? Is it imminent?
I think it will happen in the next 72 hours. It takes some time. This is a very complex operation to get the scale of troop numbers that are required, although I'm sure the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, would have been preparing for this for some time. But stepping back, this is a combination of factors that's causing this perfect storm of instability with no single stakeholder, as I say, in control of events. Israel uses its military might, its huge strength, to try and defeat Hamas in Gaza. But, of course, we're still absent of a ceasefire there, let alone any long-term strategy for peace. And now Hezbollah's involvement has opened up this second front. Iran, of course, will step in. This is where the escalation comes in. If its most valued proxy, Hezbollah, is seen to be losing. And America, I believe, could be far more influential here, but is distracted by presidential elections. And of course, finally, you've got the United Nations, which is normally where leaders do gather to provide answers, but is paralyzed because, of course, what sits behind Iran is Russia. And Russia will veto any UN resolution that does call for serious restraint.
Think of the Foreign Secretary, David Lammy. I mean, he's one of those calling for this truce, this ceasefire. But also, I mean, in his address, he did make it clear that obviously the way that Hezbollah is behaving and has behaved is completely unacceptable. It was perhaps a slightly stronger line from him than I was expecting.
Well, Hezbollah runs a rogue state inside Lebanon, and there's a big question there as to how we, the West, allowed Iran to cultivate these proxy influence, Hamas, Hezbollah, and indeed the Houthis as well, right across the Middle East, that's responsible for so much of the instability today. You're still left with two key issues for the United Nations. Firstly, securing that elusive ceasefire in Gaza, and now secondly, stability in northern Israel and southern Lebanon. There, it potentially could be easier because there's already a UN resolution from a previous encounter, UN Resolution 1701, that calls for Hezbollah, as you imply, to move back to the Litani River, which is about 30 kilometers in Lebanon. And that would satisfy, I think, Israel and prevent potentially a ground invasion. But right now, Hezbollah have said, no, we're not going to do that until we have a ceasefire.
Tobias Elwood, we're out of time, but it's really good to see you this morning. Thanks very much indeed.
There's also this concern, isn't there, about evacuation of British citizens, because there's 6,000 Brits inside Lebanon. And I was reading this morning, if you want to get out at the moment, commercial flights are full for the next week or so. So people are having to make their way via land border. It's difficult, very difficult to get out of Lebanon at the moment.
It's a mess. The whole thing is a mess. It's just whether stuff can happen without it escalating in a way that people fear. Let's say Iran, at least on this at the moment, doesn't appear to be playing hardball in the way that perhaps you would expect. So that is a positive, but it's just a complete mess.
Yeah, it really is. Let us know what you think. gbnews.com/your say. Now, at 10 minutes past 7, let's take a look at some other stories coming into the newsroom this morning.
Well, reports have emerged overnight that New York's Mayor, Eric Adams, has been indicted. That's following a federal corruption investigation by the FBI into the running of America's biggest city. It remains unclear what charges he could face. In a video message released overnight, he proclaimed his innocence and vowed to clear his name.
Russian President Vladimir Putin has outlined changes to the country's nuclear doctrine. The Russian leader said it means Moscow could now respond using nuclear weapons if attacked by conventional arms. His announcement coincided with President Zelensky's appearance at the United Nations, where he said Russia must be forced into peace.
And the former sub-postmaster Sir Alan Bates has been knighted after exposing the Horizon IT scandal. Sir Alan given his honour by Princess Anne at a ceremony at Windsor Castle yesterday. He says the news of his knighthood came out of the blue and he's excited to put it to good use.
And he's got his wife Suzanne with him because they got married
pictures.
now.
Oh, yes. Oh, they did. They got married on Necker Island, didn't
Yes, Richard Branson was the officiant, wasn't he?
Which is all very odd.
Yeah. Oh, good for him. Good for him.
You know, good on him.
Yep. And it's a lovely photo of the two of them on the front page of the Times this morning. So good on them.
I've just spotted this as well, just very quickly.
Oh, okay.
Picture of Harry and Meghan. This is what it's the Telegraph features with a couple of halos. I don't know what that's about. Haven't read it, but
They're
just
trying to improve their public image.
Right.
It's called Operation... Hang on. Saintly Sussexes. Harry and Meghan's PR fight back begins.
There you go. It's interesting, isn't it? Right, you don't want to look outside. If you've still got the curtains closed, don't open them.
Just carry on watching GB News.
Yeah. Anyway, here is your forecast with Alex.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Morning, welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office. Here on GB News, we are expecting the rain to cause further issues over the next day and a half. Further heavy rain today, tonight and tomorrow morning is expected to cause further flooding. Met Office warnings are in place. Check the Met Office website or app for full details. Particularly wet today over north-east England, parts of Northern Ireland, North Wales, also seeing some heavy downpours. And in the south, a bit more showery in nature. There'll be some brighter spells, but here too, some heavy downpours are likely. Much of Scotland looking dry, some sunny spells on the west coast. It's quite cool here. Temperatures elsewhere struggling in the mid-teens, feeling pretty chilly with that persistent rain and the winds coming in from the North Sea over north-east England and the far southeast of Scotland. Further south, we will see some sunny spells through the day, but there'll still be some heavy downpours around as the rain builds up here, particularly tonight and tomorrow. The potential for further flooding, a wet zone over North Wales and northern England. As I said, looking a little drier across the southwest of Scotland. A scattering of showers in northern Scotland with that northerly wind bringing a chill. The wet weather this morning should clear away from Northern Ireland, but likely to linger in North Wales, northern England well into this evening, and then we're looking at some heavier bursts of rain developing over the Midlands and southern England and South Wales as we go through the night. Because it's been so wet this week, that is likely to cause some further flooding issues through the night and first thing in the morning. Temperatures just about holding up in double figures tonight, but further north it is turning colder. The northerly winds pushing the rain away, but also introducing a cooler feel. Some good spells of sunshine tomorrow over central and southern Scotland, a much brighter day over northeast England. The rain should also finally clear from southern parts after a wet start. So many areas becoming dry and bright by the afternoon, but also noticeably fresher with the winds coming down from the north. A distinctly cooler feel with temperatures struggling to get into the mid-teens. Many places only 11 or 12 Celsius. Bye for now.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Now, it's miserable outside, but there is some good news today.
Is there?
There's still plenty of time to grab £36,000 in the Great British Giveaway.
That is like having, if you do your very simple maths, £3,000 a month in your bank account every month for a whole year, which means, in effect, next year is on us. So here's how you make the tax-free cash yours.
You could be the next Great British Giveaway winner with a whopping £36,000 in tax-free cash in your bank account. Imagine getting the winning phone call for that. Watching on demand. Good luck.
Yes, good luck.
Yes, best of luck indeed.
And we'll work out why that is. You can text cash or bonus. We're just trying to work out why you can text both.
Oh, yeah, just wondering. Anyway,
there must be a reason.
Be one of those things.
We'll find out.
Technology. Right, still to come. Should schools go vegan? We'll debate that next.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together and what have we got, in my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Sports broadcaster Gary Lineker is cut his pay for Match of the Day. So he's in talks with the Beeb over a multi-year deal for Match of the Day after volunteering to take a pay cut.
Yeah, so he's volunteering £350,000 to knock off his salary. So he'll just be taking home a comfortable £1 million. So, you know, maybe he'll need some clothes donations as well. But you can't really argue with that, can you? I'm sure that money will be spent better elsewhere.
It's still a massive salary, isn't it?
It is still a massive salary. I think the thing with things like this is that I don't know how much of appeal, and, you know, I'm not the biggest football fan in the world, but, you know, how much of an appeal does Gary Lineker have? And when you think of the BBC, where it's not really out to make profit, I really feel like jobs like that should go to young upstarts, young presenters, getting in new talent, rather than paying the old talent £1 million.
Yeah, I reckon, Esther, if you ask Match of the Day viewers, do you tune in to see Gary Lineker or do you tune in to watch the football highlights? They tune in to watch the football highlights.
Watch the football highlights and fall asleep on the sofa.
Yeah.
They don't care about Gary Lineker and all of his cronies and all of his mates. He gets the same people in again and again. Look, I think, talking about optics, because we're talking about optics today, aren't we, about the clothes and everything. Gary Lineker, the optics, what a hero. That's what he's doing. He's making himself look good by giving back in his way. I mean, absolutely, we want new talent. I would much rather have more voices and different people on Match of the Day. I watch it occasionally with my family. I wouldn't tune in myself that much.
I can never stop.
But they have the same people all the time.
Yeah. To be fair, the plot twist here is that, was it Jermaine Jenas? Was that his name?
Last time we were here.
Was kind of like set to take over, or that was the rumour, but now obviously that's not going to happen. So it might have been that Gary was out the door and they've actually said, oh, actually stay a bit longer.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans, and this is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Now, the Labour Party donor, Dale Vince. Not heard of him, actually. I'm not familiar with Mr Vince. Anyway, he's called on the government to scrap a law that makes it compulsory for schools to serve meat and dairy products to children.
Well, he's claimed that schools don't need to offer meat on the menu every single day.
Well, currently, the guidance said a wide range of food groups are necessary for children's health. Sounds sensible.
That does sound sensible, doesn't it?
I say that as a vegetarian.
So, this morning we're asking the questions. Should school meals go entirely vegan?
Let's talk to nutritionist Kim Pearson and projects manager at Peter, Dr. Caris Bennett. Good to see you both this morning. Caris, can I start with you? It's all well and good to encourage people to be vegetarian or vegan. I say I've been vegetarian for 45 years. I mean, I'm all for that. I'm slightly worried about forcing it on people, but particularly children, where a balanced nutrition is obviously very important.
It's just completely outdated that there is a meat mandate, that schools are forced to have meat, fish and dairy on the menu regularly, because we're in a climate crisis and we're in a health crisis. We've got higher than ever number of children in primary school who are suffering from obesity. And in secondary school, only a quarter of kids eat 5 portions of fruit and veg a day. And we know that if people are eating too much animal-derived foods like bacon, sausages, they're going to suffer from serious diseases when they're adults, including cancer, diabetes, heart attacks and stroke. We don't need schools to be serving meat. And actually, modern diets have changed so much that half of children now of school age are already vegetarian, vegan, or they want to be in future. So come on, let's scrap this meat mandate. Let's evolve and let schools choose what they have on the menu as long as it is nutritionally balanced, which it absolutely can be if it's vegan.
OK, Kim Pearson, let's bring you in at this stage. What do you make of what Dr. Karras was saying there? An outdated meat mandate. No need for it.
I think that choice and variety are key, and that we should be looking at what's genuinely beneficial from an environmental perspective and also from a perspective of children's health. Too much of the food that is served is ultra processed, and that is ultra processed meat and ultra processed vegan foods. From an environmental perspective, intensive farming of any type is detrimental for the environment, be that dairy, meat or crops. We know that pesticides sprayed on crops are killing bees, damaging the ecosystem, and are known to cause cancer. So we can't put all of the blame solely on meat, and I am in favour of having a variety of options, all of which are whole food based and cutting out ultra processed options.
Karras, you've got to say that, I mean, that sounds, sensible, but also, I mean, one thing Kim's pointing out there is choice. Because if you're going to have a child who is either vegetarian or vegan, that should be a choice made either by them in conjunction with their parents, shouldn't it, rather than a mandate from the government or a school?
What's happening right now is the government are restricting choice. They're saying to schools, look, you have to have meat on the menu 3 days a week or more. You have to have dairy foods on the menu every day. And it's just not fair to children, so many more of which want to eat ethically and sustainably. It's not fair to parents or the school governors. We've got to scrap this. They've gotten rid of it in Scotland. They have nutritional guidelines instead. And in fact, the government's own public nutrition advice is called the Eat Well Guide. It says that the amount of meat and processed meats people are eating should be lowered, and people should eat more plant-based proteins like peas, beans, nuts, and other protein sources. I mean, I totally agree with Kim that we've got to look at the environmental damage that the meat industry is causing. It is absolutely wrecking the planet. The United Nations and the own government's strategy, the National Food Strategy, says that we can't be keeping on pushing meat.
Forgive me for jumping in, but forgive me, but I mean, one thing which confuses me in all of this is we're talking about the nutrition. The nutritional needs for children who are growing and who are developing, and it turns into a discussion about the environment. We should be looking at children's health, shouldn't we, in this, not the environmental concerns.
Well, the science shows that foods that are worse for the environment are actually terrible for nutrition as well, like processed meats like salami and sausages and bacon. I mean, we've really got to look at the balanced evidence, and scientific bodies like the Eat Lancet Commission did look at that. They studied both the nutritional aspects and the climate and environmental aspects, and they recommended a diet that's mostly plant-based. So it's really outdated. The last time the school rules were updated was 11 years ago. And since then, we now know the huge detrimental impact of stuffing down all this animal-derived food. And we know it's absolutely terrible for animals who suffer in pain and die a bloody death at the slaughterhouse. Let's have kinder, greener school meals before it's too late.
OK, Kim Pearson, last word to you. Do you think you can get a nutritionally balanced diet for a child on a vegan diet, on a plant-based diet? Because Dr. Karras is talking there about salami and sausages and bacon. But if you're talking about chicken, fish, grass-fed beef, I mean, that must be nutritionally beneficial to a growing child, surely.
I absolutely agree with eliminating processed meats. There's absolutely no question there at all. However, there's no link between high-quality, well-reared meat using sustainable regenerative farming practices and adverse health outcomes. And meat is a high quality protein. It's going to fill children up, keep them satisfied, support their concentration and their energy levels. So I was vegetarian for 14 years. I feel strongly that we need to be farming animals in a way that is minimal in terms of animal cruelty, giving them the lives they deserve to live, and using sustainable regenerative practices. But I simply don't think that putting all of the blame on meat and on animal products is correct. I think that there are unsustainable farming methods of all sorts of different produce, crops and groceries included.
OK, there we need to leave it. Kim, Caris, thank you both very much indeed. Let us know what you think.
Yes.
gbnews.com/you'll say.
Still to come, do stay with us. Paul Coyte's going to be here with all of the latest football news. That's next.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. In Tyne and Wear, the A188 is closed along Chillingham Road at Heaton after an accident. In County Down, the A48 is blocked by a fallen tree on Main Street at Donegal D. In Bedfordshire, the A421 remains closed each way between the A6 and M1 near Bedford because of flooding. On the M1 in Hertfordshire, there's a lane closed southbound at Junction 8 at Hemel Hempstead after an accident. There are queues from Junction 10 at Luton Airport with a breakdown in the queue. The M25 in Essex is closed anti-clockwise from Junction 28 for the A12 to 27 for the M11 after an accident with queues a couple of miles back beyond Junction 29 for the A127. On the M25 in Buckinghamshire, there's a lane closed clockwise just after Junction 16 for the M40 after an accident, with 2 miles of queues towards there. And the M2 in Kent is closed westbound at Junction 1 at Strood after an accident, with the A2 closed eastbound towards there from Gravesend.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent? I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's time to go through the sport now with Paul Coyte. Morning.
Good morning.
Should we start with
football?
some football?
Shall we have a little football, shall we, to start with?
Yes.
And the results are Arsenal 5, Bolton Wanderers
0.
Near 1. Yeah. They had the kids out, Arsenal. They had 17-year-olds, they had 18-year-olds, they had a 16-year-old. Jack Porter, goalkeeper, we spoke about him earlier.
Phenomenal.
It is phenomenal.
Yeah.
And I keep saying it's because a goalkeeper, there's so much more responsibility, and if you make a mistake, then everybody's going to be all over you. So you really do have to keep it together. And for a 16-year-old, 16 years, 72 days, well done, Jack Porter. Played in goal for Arsenal, made his debut for Arsenal yesterday. There's Miles Lewis-Skelly is 17, Josh Nichols is 18. Mikel Arteta was asked about this. And you know what? Good on old Captain Black, because he did go for the kids and let them play. This is what he had to say last night.
A really positive night in every sense, the result, the performance. We gave minutes as well to a lot of senior players and they really showed a lot of quality tonight. And on top of that, as you said, we gave the opportunity to quite a lot of academy players. They responded really well and it's just so fulfilling to see their faces, their reaction, how much it means to them. So, great night.
Well, but the thing is, often you get clubs that, if it doesn't work out well, then it's how can you do this? How can you not take this seriously? But it's all worked out very well, 5-1. Liverpool beat West Ham 5-1. And in the fourth round draw, so I always wait for the draw of the cup, and if Spurs are in it, instead of thinking, oh, let's draw at home, I just sit there thinking, please, whatever you do, don't let this be Man City. Don't let this be Man City.
And it's worked well for you then?
And, yeah, Spurs have drawn Man City. Why does it always happen? Happened in the FA Cup last year. So it's fourth round draw. It's Brentford versus Sheffield Wednesday. Southampton will play Stoke. Spurs against Man City. Wimbledon against Newcastle or Chelsea. Manchester United, Leicester. Brighton versus Liverpool. Preston versus Arsenal. And Aston Villa versus Crystal Palace.
Should we have a little bit of tennis?
Yes. I think we should. Marin Cilic.
Yeah.
He won the US Open. When was that? 2014. So 10 years since he won that. So he's dropped down the rankings. He is the world... No, well, let's see if you can guess what he is. He's the lowest ranked player to win an ATP tournament. So he won...
197th.
777.
Was that just a lucky guess?
Yeah.
Unbelievable. All sevens.
I love that number.
777.
What? You're not serious? Did you know that?
How does she do that?
I know. It's a skill.
It's incredible. It's
Is
just
it written down somewhere?
No, it's the
I
lucky
haven't
number,
seen.
777.
Oh, it blooming is. It's on the
I've
list.
just got it all up here.
Oh, right. There you
No,
go.
it's written down. But no,
I was
what
happy
a
to go
comeback.
along with that, Ellie. I was happy to go
So
along.
was I.
So
him digging it
he's
out.
leapt up 525 places in the rankings
Just
now.
like that.
So well done.
Very good, very good. Good for
And how about a little sailing?
Oh,
Yes.
yeah, go on.
Ahoy there. It's now time for the Louis Vuitton Cup. Now, I've been trying very hard to understand the sailing. There we are. This is the semi-final. Great Britain. It's Sir Ben Ainsley with Ineos Britannia. And they're going against their great rivals. This is the semi-final. So today, it starts... tell me if this doesn't make sense, because I'm trying to make sense of this. The final of the Louis Vuitton Cup, there was 8 teams, is now going to be Ineos Britannia, so Great Britain, against Luna Rossa Prada Pirelli. Guess who's sponsoring the Italians this year?
Prada.
And Pirelli. Yes, good. You're more Prada than Pirelli. He's more Pirelli than Prada. I think it's safe to say.
And that's why we're a good
But
team.
anyway, there's 2 races a day over the next week. First to 7 will win the chance. They not only win the Louis Vuitton Cup, which I know Ellie's more interested in the case it comes in than the actual cup itself, But whoever wins that will then go forward to go against New Zealand for the America's Cup, which has been going since 1851, and Britain have never won it. And even though for many years it was only Great Britain against America, and Britain could never win it. So they could well do it.
Well,
there you go.
Thank you very much.
There you
Where's
go.
the stock tour?
This is sailing at the... This is high-class sailing, my friend.
Sort of handbag and shoed out.
You really? Is that what it
And
was?
tyres.
And tyres.
And tyres.
I'm more interested in the tyres.
Yeah, OK.
And I'm more interested in the handbags. So there we are. Thank
Well,
you.
I'm
Something
all
for
about the
everyone.
sailing.
Something for everyone. Thank you, Paul Coyte.
Hello, sailor. Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Something Dame Joan Collins may have said in her acting career at some point. She's been talking about that fantastic, iconic career, and also talking about the current political way of life here in the UK.
Yeah, she covers everything, talking to Andrew Pearce. Here's a snippet of their interview.
Tell me about the modern world now. It's very fashionable now to call you all actors.
I don't call myself an
You're
actor.
an actor.
I call, if I'm in a room with some actors and actresses, I call us actors.
Right.
And I do sometimes call myself a jobbing actor, but on the whole, I like to be called an actress.
Yeah.
It's a very pretty word.
Yeah.
It's, and it's feminine, and I consider myself to be feminine and a feminist. And why should we be called female actors? I find it demeaning,
Right.
frankly.
Yeah. A bit too... And do you think this wokery thing has got a bit too much of this wokery?
Good God, yes.
Yeah.
You know I do.
I do.
I think it's gone out of control.
Yeah.
Really. You can't say anything. People get offended.
Yeah.
We've lost our British sense of humour.
Right.
You know, I grew up with my father going to... Because he was an agent for variety halls. And so we would go and we would see outrageous comedians making... you know, jokes about their mother-in-law and fat people. You can't say that now. You can't say any of the stuff. So I grew up watching those from the age of 11 or 12. Daddy had all these different acts and things that he would do, and it was great fun. And then, of course, as soon as I went to Hollywood, there was Milton Berle, who was the most outrageous comedian and dressed up as a female, and there's no way you could do any of that today. I think, you know, some of the things are fine, but I think we've lost our sense of humour tremendously, don't you?
I do, and I think
I'm so glad you still got it.
We have to push back at it, and as you know, sometimes I probably say the wrong thing.
And you get hate mail, don't you?
I do get hate mail, but that's fine, we don't mind that, we get used to it.
And you can see that full interview, 9:30 this morning.
Now, do stay with us. Still to come, the suspect in the Madeleine McCann case has reportedly made a shocking confession to his inmate. More on that in just a moment.
I'm Andrew Pearce. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Nana Queer, weekends from 3 p.m.
I'm now joined by a truly inspirational man. He's an endurance runner, Ben Smith. 401 marathons in just 401 days for mental health and well-being. He was spurned on after being bullied as a child, was able to raise a whopping £250,000. I'm pleased to say that he joins me now. Right, so this was a while ago, wasn't it?
Yes.
How long ago was it?
Well, we're coming up to, I think next year, roughly about 10 years since we started it. In 2026 will be 10 years since we finished.
So when did you run the marathons?
So it was between 2015 and 2016, over the course of 401 days, all around the UK.
What kind of madness was that?
Oh, it was an adventure, let me tell you.
Yeah.
Like, honestly, on day one when we started in Bristol, never ever thought that the project would ever become what it became. But over the course of the 401 days, we ran with 13,500 people within 8 miles of everywhere on the British mainland, from Land's End to John O'Groats. So,
and that was the journey from Land's End to John O'Groats?
Yeah. We covered so many different communities around the UK because I suppose the reason why I was doing it was to raise so much money for 2 anti-bullying charities that we wanted to include people in that. And yeah, I got to run in some amazing places.
I bet you did. What would you say is a beautiful place? I mean, the whole country, I love this country, but there are some outstanding, beautiful areas around. What would you say?
Oh, definitely.
Where's the best place that you run?
Well, I think I've got a few, but I think I would say probably the Highlands of Scotland.
I knew you would say someone like that.
Yeah, just the kind of vastness of it, the dramaticness of it. I remember running up and down one of the paths in the Highlands near Glencoe and coming face to face with a wild stag. So it was quite scary.
What did it do?
It did nothing. It did absolutely nothing. It was quite used to people because of the path.
What are you doing here? This is my house.
GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Bev Turner. Thank you for joining us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Right, time to take through the papers this morning with the legendary Pat Sharp.
Oh, thank you.
And the very nearly legendary Emma Wolf. Good morning to you both.
Good morning.
Emma,
Good morning.
let's start with... I know we touched on this in the last hour, but it's such a great story. Keir Starmer in the £18 million penthouse which he uses from time to time.
He does. This is juicy, this story. I'm trying to think of a polite way of putting it. Basically, this is the kind of furore that's been really overshadowing the Labour Party conference, which should have been, you know, their victory march. It should have been their celebration after so long out of power, and instead of which every single journalist wanted to know what is going on with Lord Ali, with the donations, with the frocks and the glasses, and now this penthouse, this £18 million penthouse. I believe it's in Covent Garden. Starmer told us, the Prime Minister told us, that his son needed it for his GCSE. So once again, using their children as an excuse, you know, free tickets. Well, my child needed to go to see Taylor Swift, this kind of thing. So his child apparently needed a quiet space to revise for his GCSEs. Unfortunately for Starmer, the dates don't really tally. So the dates when he had the use of the penthouse don't really add up with the GCSE season. And then this footage has appeared of him during 2021. He was filming COVID videos from this place, from this crash pad in the centre of town, with Christmas cards and family photos in the background, which is all very odd. So was Starmer trying to make out that it was his family home? What was going on there? How much time was spent there? And the Daily Mail are asking some very juicy questions. Why did he and his family stay in this place for a month after the GCSE exam season finished? Why did Sir Keir Starmer shoot these videos at Lord Ali's flat and not in his own home? Blah, blah, blah. They've got about 10 questions, and I think the Prime Minister needs to answer.
And there are questions, aren't there? Because the family home is a large property, large family home in Kentish Town, only a few miles away. So what's the need for this very large penthouse in Covent Garden?
Well, the only worry I have is when Emma mentioned Christmas time with the picture, was it all gift wrapped?
Oh, ha, ha, ha. Very good. Look, I tell you what, I can imagine you with an £18 million penthouse.
Clearly. Yeah, well, I'm probably not, you know, being not the Prime Minister. If anybody wants to gift me an £18 million penthouse, I will obviously live in it. But I'd rather work hard for it, to be honest with you, myself. Yeah. And I don't have one, so you're imagining wrong.
Oh, sorry.
Well, yeah, I'm trying to keep track of who I've lent, which a penthouse I've lent to which friend. But, I mean, there is a serious side to this. People talking about the blatant hypocrisy here. When the Labour Party are talking about things like taking away the VAT exemption on private schools, which are often used for disabled and children with special needs, and the hypocrisy, feeling that his son's education was that important, if this is true, that it was so important that he needed a quiet place to revise when other children are going to be suffering. So people are very angry about this.
I did my GCSE revision down the pub with a pint of mild and a Hamlet.
Oh, I'm impressed with GCSEs. I was an O-level man, showing our age.
I'm much, much younger.
And I did it in the local library to escape my 5 brothers and sisters. So, you know, kids do have to... Well, kids do have to revise
they have to manage,
where they
don't
can.
they?
Exactly.
Pat, let's have a look at The Sun. They're leading on it this morning on their front page.
Yeah, it's a heavy one, this, though.
Yeah, Christian Bruckner, who's the sort of Madeleine McCann suspect, admitting, apparently, that he has snatched a child.
The only thing with this, Stephen, is that it is technically hearsay because he's apparently admitted it to somebody who he was in a cell with back in 2020, and this guy's now decided to come out and tell a court all the various things that Mr. Bruckner had told him. So we're not hearing it from the horse's mouth, so to speak, but there is... it's quite a tough one, this, because I think every time anything appears in the paper, I think it just further destroys the McCanns because they have to, once again, relive the nightmare. Yeah. So it's a very difficult one from now to hear from somebody who said he once spoke to this chap in a cell and now he's decided to come out and say what he said. It's he said, she said.
Yeah, yeah. It's all very odd because you sort of think because this guy's in prison, if he did actually do it, why wouldn't you just fess up to it now? At this stage. It's all very, very odd.
It is, because this story now doesn't really take anything any further because he hasn't physically said any details as to where Madeleine could be, but he's just said that he admitted various things to him, that he did take a child in Portugal in that year. So it's a real tricky one, and I feel so sorry for the parents every time anything like this appears, maybe when they're just even trying to get through their days.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know how any parent ever ever manages to, you know, have a moment of peace, if you've lost a child and you never know whether they've been murdered or abducted, if they might be alive, that hope, you would just keep hoping forever. It's absolutely destroys you. Yeah.
Emma, let's stay with you, shall we, and look at the Daily Telegraph. It's on the front, of course, of many of the papers this morning. Israeli boots ready to hit the ground in Lebanon.
Yeah, the situation is obviously getting really alarming here. And the army chief of Israel has been saying that IDF jets have been carrying out this heavy bombardment of Hezbollah to pave the way for boots to enter enemy territory. Joe Biden has been saying all-out war is possible but not inevitable. Our Prime Minister has urged, the Prime Minister has urged British citizens to flee Lebanon immediately.
It's just not that easy for them, actually, is it?
You can't get a flight.
It's not that simple. No, you can't, exactly.
The papers this morning.
The purpose of the invasion is to allow these Israeli citizens back. 60,000 of them have obviously had to flee since these Hezbollah missiles have been fired into Israel. But the situation is extremely alarming out there.
Yeah,
Horrific. Horrific. Well, we're just going to have to wait and see and watch that one.
Region, exactly.
Just a nightmare. Can we have a look at the Express? Because, I mean, we knew Alan Bates was getting a knighthood. We knew that was all happening. But he's had the ceremony now in Windsor Castle, Princess Anne, I mean, all very grand. Officially Sir Alan Bates. I mean, this man actually has anything ever been more well-deserved?
I think it's fantastic. I love the picture of him and his wife there, and he's holding his award. It's just wonderful. 70 years of age. This is the guy who obviously was made infamous now because of the TV show. But he's done so much for the Justice for Sub-Posters Alliance is the thing that he set up. And he's gone on to say that he will use this now to beat the authorities over the head, if necessary. Not physically, of course, with the actual award. But being knighted, I think, is great because it just shines more light on this for the fact that he himself hasn't been paid out his full sum. And a number of the others are still waiting as well.
Well, yeah, it would seem the majority when you would look at all the details. And you do wonder why. I mean, I don't even know why the last government, and certainly this government, from everything it says it stands for, why hands are just not going into the pockets immediately.
Yeah. It makes you wonder, because if the shoe was on the other foot and you owed a parking ticket, they'd be chasing you down for that.
Wouldn't
they would, yeah. I mean, Sir Alan Bates actually took the opportunity yesterday speaking to the press, criticising the Labour government, saying you've allowed payouts to come to a standstill, and he even said he would consider fundraising for a court case.
Yeah. No, good for him. And isn't this a victory for the small people, for the people that don't matter, that never get anything, you know? It's like the infected blood scandal, you know, it's little people, so they don't really care. But if the honours system is good for anything, it should be for giving knighthoods to these kind of people who actually deserving people, not just, you know, cronies and pals of the Prime Minister and whatever. I think this is absolutely brilliant.
And he has said the gong is for the whole group as well, not just for him, so for everybody who was involved.
And
so
I hope he does
he's
hold
accepting it on their behalf,
feet to the fire, because they made all the right sounds at the time, and actually they should follow through on that.
Where's the money?
Where's the money?
And where's the money?
Show me the money.
As well. Where is the money?
Because there's plenty of companies who benefited, so therefore, you know, there is money to be paid out.
Emma, let's look at this very distressing story, shall we? In the Daily Mirror this morning, this is a mum of 5 who has died after a butt lift treatment.
Yeah, so this lady, Alice Webb, was only 34 years old. She had 5 children in Gloucester, and she had this thing called a liquid Brazilian butt lift, which was supposed to be a safer alternative to the full-on cosmetic surgical procedure. It's actually the most risky of all cosmetic procedures. 1 in every 4,000 people who have this procedure die. I mean, 1 in 4,000, that's quite high for a cosmetic treatment.
Why are people having it done if it's so risky? Just have a rounder bottom.
To have a rounder bottom, and it's meant to be safer. And campaigners are calling this a crisis waiting to happen. All of these liquid Brazilian butt lifts are carried out by non-healthcare practitioners, so people are not qualified. I've talked for years about the fact that this stuff should not be carried out. Well, it shouldn't be carried out at all, in my view, but this shouldn't be carried out by people who are not qualified. You can't have these dangerous procedures becoming kind of high street, high street things where young girls can go in and pay thousands of pounds.
It's terrifying, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is.
It's so unregulated, this industry.
5 children have lost their mum because of this. Absolutely unregulated.
It's horrific. And I tell you what, when you look at the picture, this is what I don't get, Pat. And I know there's possibly more pressures on women than there is on men about how, you know,
possibly,
how you look and all the rest of it. Well, yeah, but there's
yes.
more pressure on men.
Yes,
to
but
look
traditionally, far more pressures on women.
You look at this woman in the papers today. I mean, she's a beautiful woman, so a young, beautiful mother of 5. Why on earth do these people think, oh, we need to have something surgical done or, you know, some procedure done just to, you know, perk something up a bit? You know.
So can it be the pressure of social media, of seeing somebody else doing it?
Maybe.
And thinking, oh, I need to go down that route. I need to have this injection, that filler, this, that, and, you know, I don't know.
It just gets ridiculous, though, doesn't it?
It can be more serious kind of body dysmorphia and things when people become completely fixated. I mean, you know, look, we've accepted, you know, boob jobs for years and years and years. It's a similar thing, Stephen. It just happens to be on the bottom instead. And mostly the results, I mean, look at Katie Price. Mostly the results are ridiculous and ludicrous and way over the top. And we can all see that the person themselves can't see what's happening to them. But it is a form. I think it's a form of kind of mental illness.
I just think we should all learn to grow old and sag gracefully.
Yes,
a little
absolutely.
bit, you know. It's got to be done, you know.
I'll let you know when you're sagging.
Well, I'm already sagging. You must have done, Pat, a few voiceovers over the years.
I have, yes. My dulcet tones.
Yes,
have been
I bet.
Yes,
I
I've been
bet.
but not aged 89. What a gig for Dame Judi Dench.
It's phenomenal. So what's she doing?
She's going to be, this week, the voice of Facebook's chatbot. Now, I have to say, I had to look up what a chatbot was to actually get the full details, because whenever I'm online, I kind of just do it, you know, with typing. But apparently, these voices can speak to you. There are voices out there that already speak to you on Instagram and WhatsApp as well, for some reason. But apparently, they're now having superstars' voices to do it. So, you know, like with your sat-nav, instead of just the regular voice, you can suddenly have Alan Partridge doing it or something. So
wow.
It's going to be Dame Judi Dench and some other people like John Cena, the ex-wrestler.
Oh, yeah.
So they've got a gig where they're going to say various things, and then when you ask the chatbot something, it will reply to you, but it'll be Dame Judi Dench replying.
Is that incredible?
Yes.
I want Dame Judi Dench on my sat-nav.
Have you?
Choice. No, I'd like
you want her? There you go. She's far too busy. She's got far too busy getting this gig, I think, with Facebook.
Too busy with Meta, isn't she?
Yeah. So
how you do it? 89.
Yeah, it's great to get a gig at that age, isn't it? I think.
It's not bad going. I bet it was good money as well.
I would think so. Yeah, but I wonder what things she has to physically say if she goes into a voiceover booth. Does she have to say various different things that they can then adapt into AI? I don't know if it'll be all her or not.
It's actually more exhausting than it sounds. I mean, you've done loads of this stuff. I narrated a couple of my earlier books. And just spending a week on my own in a darkened booth, well, obviously with the team around me, but in a darkened booth, reading out books, it's quite exhausting. It's physically exhausting on your eyes, it's exhausting on your delivery, on your voice and everything.
And she's 89.
And she's 89. Yeah. But a lot less gruelling probably than acting and being on set and, you know, all of that. At that age, you don't probably...
But it must be encouraging to be asked to do something like this that is so modern for her.
An iconic voice, though.
Absolutely.
Brilliant stuff. Pat, Emma, thanks very much indeed.
Thanks. Let's have a look at the weather.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Morning, welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. We are expecting the rain to cause further issues over the next day and a half. Further heavy rain today, tonight and tomorrow morning is expected to cause further flooding. Met Office warnings are in place. Check the Met Office website or app for full details. Particularly wet today over north-east England, parts of Northern Ireland, North Wales, also seeing some heavy downpours. And in the south, a bit more showery in nature. There'll be some brighter spells, but here too, some heavy downpours are likely. Much of Scotland looking dry, some sunny spells on the west coast. It is quite cool here. Temperatures elsewhere struggling in the mid-teens, feeling pretty chilly with that persistent rain and the winds coming in from the North Sea over north-east England and the far southeast of Scotland. Further south, we will see some sunny spells through the day, but there'll still be some heavy downpours around as the rain builds up here, particularly tonight and tomorrow. The potential for further flooding, a wet zone over North Wales and northern England. As I said, looking a little drier across the southwest of Scotland. A scattering of showers in northern Scotland with that northerly wind bringing a chill. The wet weather this morning should clear away from Northern Ireland, but likely to linger in North Wales, northern England well into this evening, and then we're looking at some heavier bursts of rain developing pouring over the Midlands and southern England and South Wales as we go through the night. Because it's been so wet this week, that is likely to cause some further flooding issues through the night and first thing in the morning. Temperatures just about holding up in double figures tonight, but further north it is turning colder. The northerly winds pushing the rain away, but also introducing a cooler feel. Some good spells of sunshine tomorrow over central and southern Scotland. A much brighter day over northeast England. The rain should also finally clear from southern parts after a wet start. So many areas becoming dry and bright by the afternoon, but also noticeably fresher with the winds coming down from the north. A distinctly cooler feel with temperatures struggling to get into the mid-teens. Many places only 11 or 12 Celsius. Bye for now.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. In Tyne and Wear, the A188 is closed along Chillingham Road at Heaton after an accident. In County Down, the A48 is blocked by a fallen tree on Moat Street at Donegal D. In Bedfordshire, the A421 remains closed each way between the A6 and M1 near Bedford because of flooding. On the M1 in Hertfordshire, there's a lane closed southbound after an accident and breakdown. Junction 8 at Hemel Hempstead, there are queues from Junction 10 at Luton Airport. The M25 in Essex is closed anti-clockwise from Junction 28 for the A12 to 27 for the M11 after an accident, with queues almost back to Junction 30 for the A13. The M2 in Kent is closed westbound at Junction 1 for the A2 at Strood after an accident causing 2 miles of queues, with the A2 closed eastbound towards there from Tollgate services at Gravesend causing delays. And trains have been stopped southbound from Gloucester to Swindon after a freight train broke down. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
You can good luck.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Britain I grew up in was the most peaceful, gentle society that has ever existed. That has been destroyed.
Opinion polls show immigration is the #1 concern to the British public. Are you proud to be British?
Yeah, I'm ever so proud.
My name is Stephen Edgington, and in this documentary, I want to find out how Britain became a nation of immigrants. Immigration, the truth, available at gbnews.com.
Hello, this is Breakfast on GB News. Let me just pull up what we need to be talking about this morning, because we're having one or two little technical issues this morning, Ellie, aren't we?
We certainly are.
Which adds to the excitement. It adds to the excitement,
We're
doesn't
going to start talking about the prison system, though, aren't we? Because dozens of prisoners have been mistakenly freed thanks to an error in the government's early release scheme.
Well, one person is understood to have already reoffended, and 5 are still on the loose as the prison crisis deepens.
That's as ministers scramble to avoid further overcrowding, with the Justice Secretary considering a points-based system to reduce an inmate's time behind bars. The Prime Minister is in New York for the UN General Assembly, where top of the agenda is avoiding all-out war in the Middle East. That's as US officials say a temporary ceasefire deal along the Israel-Lebanon border could come within hours.
Also this morning, former chair of the 1922 committee, Lord Brady, is celebrating the release of his memoir, Kingmaker. He's going to be joining us on Breakfast shortly.
Elsewhere, former presenter Philip Schofield faces fierce backlash after announcing his shock return to television.
Now it's revealed that 3/4 of women footballers think opportunities are greater for their male counterparts. Former Lioness Carly Telford will be joining us very shortly. And also in sport, 2 Carabao Cup games last night. Both ended 5-1 as Arsenal beat Bolton and Liverpool beat West Ham. Manchester United only managed to draw with FC 20 from Enschede. And in sailing, first race of the Louis Vuitton Cup between GB and Italy for the chance to race New Zealand in the America's Cup, which Britain haven't won since it began in 1851.
It's been a very wet week and there is further heavy rain to come today and tomorrow. Further Met Office warnings are in place. Join me later for all the details.
I think it's just gone 8 o'clock. I'm Stephen Dixon.
I'm Ellie Costello and this is GB News Breakfast.
Oh, yeah, I don't want technical... Let me just say, I do not want technical issues on my first day back after the holidays. No. I'm struggling to know who I am and what I'm doing.
I just want to see heart monitors across you two at the moment.
that was
I could feel it bouncing through the table. Mine was as well. Luckily, it was fixed by the time I came on, so
it was all right. Yeah, you got it easy.
Yeah, that kept happening to me when you weren't here. And usually Steve is in control of the driving. You're the one that does the auto cue. So then when you weren't here, I was like, Anyway, it's on the laptop.
Jumping up on all the wrong stories.
Anyway, we got there in the end.
It's very difficult because we can't memorise the entire programme.
No. Anyway, we got there in the end. Paul quite got to read his script. So
well, no, I didn't. It wasn't there. That was all off the top of my head. Everything was...
Very good.
Very good.
Well,
very good. Right, let's crack on with the main news for you then. Number 10, admitting to releasing 37 prisoners by mistake. Several of which still aren't back in jail. It's all part of the government's controversial early release scheme. Very early release for some of them.
Well, yes. In response, the Ministry of Justice has claimed to be working in tandem with the police to urgently return those inmates.
Well, all this comes as Labour is actually drawing up plans to introduce a Texas-style prison system, which sounds a bit alarming, doesn't it? But it actually means a point-based approach for people behaving behind bars. That means it would get out even earlier.
Well, the government will also look to invest in rehabilitation projects in a bid to curb overcrowding in prisons.
So it begs the question, is Labour really in control of law and order, or is it getting out of hand? Let's talk to our political correspondent, Olivia Utley. Well, they're going to say they're in control. It does seem a little bit chaotic at the moment.
It does feel a bit chaotic. There were worries that something like this was going to happen because the early release prisoner scheme was implemented so quickly. It was first talked about, obviously, over the general election, discussed then and implemented on the 10th of September. And there were lots of parole officers warning that there could be catastrophic consequences to sort of barrelling ahead with this before all the ducks were in a row, if you like. The government says that this is an absolutely essential step to stop prison overcrowding, and you can absolutely see where they're coming from. There was a point where there were sort of only 150 places left in male prisons across the whole country, and you could argue, and the government certainly does argue, that that is a result of Conservative mismanagement over the last 14 years. That said, there is an ideological element to this too. James Timpson, who's the prisons minister, has said on the record over and over again that he fundamentally believes that too many people are spending time in prison and that prison actually isn't the right place for people. So I think Labour might be sort of implementing this policy under the guise of necessity when there actually might be something a bit more ideological going on here. I mean, that said, something obviously did need to be done. The government is now talking as well about this Texan-style scheme for sort of less serious offenders. Now, in Texas, what they've implemented sounds a bit alarming. Obviously, Texas prisoners, you think death penalty, but actually they have a very liberal system for the prisoners who are there for less serious reasons. They are able to earn credits by sort of going to drug rehabilitation, going to lessons in prison, all of those sort of good behaviour activities enable them to earn credits which can take some time off their sentence. And if they earn enough of these credits, they can end up spending less than 25% of their sentence behind bars. Now, that would be a huge change for the UK because at the moment, the early release scheme brought the default time that prisoners spend behind bars down from 50% of their sentence to 40% of their sentence. Now it seems as though there could be a consideration of 25% of the sentence. Well, let's see how that goes down.
I mean, if we're learning anything from this crisis, this prisons crisis, if we can call it that, is that our prisons are at capacity. We need more prisons, do we not? Or do you think the do you think that is something that could be announced by this Labour government? Or if we're talking about the ideological side of this, would Lord Timpson not want more prisons being built?
Well, I think that's a really interesting question. I mean, ideologically, I think this Labour government probably isn't that predisposed to building more prisons. And also politically, you know, this is why the Conservative government was almost certainly pro, and they were pro building more prisons. The problem is that there is a very, very long lead time on things like this. And this is so often the problem that we get in politics. Government knows that it only has sort of 5 years before the next election, and it always puts these long-term issues, it sort of kicks them into the long grass. Building prisons would help the government of 10 years' time, but Labour at the moment doesn't know that that's going to be them. So the idea of funneling all of that money, when obviously public finances are so tight, into something which might not politically actually benefit their party, it's a bit of a tricky decision.
But then, I mean, I know they are separate issues and there is a danger in conflating everything, but you can't help, under the current circumstances, look at all of this and say, well, Labour's letting more people out. They're looking at making time served even shorter, at a point where they've just been quite determined and quite fierce in trying to get a whole load of people into prison for what many considered to be very insignificant crimes, if you like. And some were significant. I'm not dismantling that, but for some people, there were big question marks over it all.
Well, that's what Nigel Farage was arguing in PMQs last week, that there's a sort of two-tier justice system. On the one hand, all of these prisoners being released after 40% of their sentence, and on the other hand, all of these rioters being thrown into prison, some of them, as you say, for relatively minor crimes. What Labour would argue is that the people who they are letting out of prison are ones who shouldn't really perhaps have been in prison in the first place. And one idea that the Justice Secretary is looking at the moment is actually closing down some women's prisons on the argument that studies show that, you know, women, especially mothers who go into prison, there's worse outcomes long-term for them and their children. And women are so rarely violent offenders. Of course, we can all think of some very serious exceptions to that. So what Labour would argue is that it's sort of freeing up space for the more serious offenders to have space in prisons, while letting go some of those people who petty criminals who sort of get into reoffending cycles once they get into prison. But as you say, Stephen, that argument is a little bit perhaps undermined by the fact that all of these rioters, some of whom didn't seem to commit that serious a crime, ending up in prison and apparently with no chance of that early release.
Olivia, whilst we've got you, Gifting Gate, the gifting scandal, it's not going anywhere, is it? And now there's questions about Lord Ali, the Labour donor's £18 million penthouse, and investigation has found Sir Keir Starmer was recording messages, wasn't he, during the COVID lockdown? We've got a clip of this, actually, which we'll share with you now. We don't. But we did share it earlier on in the programme, didn't we? So this is Sir Keir Starmer in Lord Ali's penthouse making a statement to the public.
About staying at home.
About staying at home, and he has appeared to make this penthouse look like it could be his own family home, with family photos and Christmas cards in the background.
Well, exactly. I mean, the story is very strange. There seems to be a lot of layers to it. We found out over the last few days that Starmer was using this penthouse of Lord Ali's in Covent Garden. Keir Starmer claims for his son to use so that he could revise peacefully over the general election season. I think some people will have quite a lot of sympathy with that. Obviously, there were lots of journalists outside Keir Starmer's house over the general election period. But it has now emerged that Keir Starmer was actually in that apartment over the COVID pandemic and appears to have made it look like his own apartment by putting up family photos and sort of Christmas cards, etc., behind his head. Now, obviously, during the COVID pandemic, it's not quite clear exactly what point during the lockdown, because obviously we phased in and out of lockdown at different times, but generally people were encouraged to work from home, and presumably that is why Keir Starmer's video was filmed from a house. The problem is it wasn't his own house, and I'm not quite sure what the rules were on working from somebody else's home. This does feel like a story which isn't going away anytime soon.
OK. Olivia, thanks very much indeed. I just find it extraordinary. It's extraordinary. I can't get my head around it.
Yeah.
Actually, if he's all this, I mean, especially the COVID stuff, and after all the stuff that was thrown at Boris Johnson, and perhaps you might say, well, you know, he deserved it. But Partygate, and then, but if you was he breaking lockdown rules by being in someone else's flat to record all this stuff? Maybe not. I mean, I don't know, but it's certainly questions that need to be answered.
Yeah, well, Downing Street have said they are confident that no rules were broken. But it is this issue, isn't it? Is that when you set yourself up to be a different kind of politician, when you were that critical of those that went before you for breaking COVID rules, you need to be squeaky clean yourself, don't you?
Right. Senior officials have reportedly said a 21-day ceasefire will be implemented between Israel and Hezbollah following joint calls from the US, the UK and other allied nations.
Well, that's as world leaders gathered at the United Nations in New York following fears of escalating tensions in the Middle East.
Well, President Biden voiced concerns of an all-out war. Our Prime Minister demanded a diplomatic solution to the conflict.
In relation to Lebanon, I'm very worried about the escalation and calling for all parties to step back from the brink to de-escalate. We need a ceasefire so this can be sorted out diplomatically.
Well, Lebanon's health ministry has reported 620 people have been killed by Israeli airstrikes so far, with a further 500,000 people potentially displaced by the bombing campaign.
Let's talk to the former UK ambassador to the UN and former National Security Advisor to Number 10.
Sir Mark Lyle-Grant, good to see you this morning. Thank you so much for your time. What's your assessment of where we are now?
Well, in terms of the military offensive, clearly Hezbollah is very much on the back foot, and Israel has succeeded in degrading their capabilities very substantially over the last week. They've killed a lot of the senior Hezbollah commanders, they've disrupted their communications, they've wrecked their command and control. So they are very much on the offensive and Hezbollah on the defensive. But there are still efforts at a diplomatic solution to bring an end to this particular conflict. And the latest call for a 21-day ceasefire is the latest we've seen coming out of New York. Now, it's not yet clear to me whether either side will accept this. It looks as though it would be of more benefit to Hezbollah because it would give them some respite from the aerial bombardment by Israel, but rather less benefit to Israel itself, who is keen to press ahead now that they're on the front foot.
It does seem very confusing, though, doesn't it, from an outside perspective? Because, as you say, I mean, discussed at the UN, where we're told, well, it's something which could be in the offing very quickly. It's a real possibility, whilst Israel's busy saying, you know, we're going to have boots on the ground. It's very difficult to know who to believe.
Yes, I mean, a 21-day ceasefire is really quite ambitious. Obviously, it would give respite to the civilians on both sides, which would be good, but it wouldn't overall solve the problem. It would give a little bit of space to try and reach an agreement, which would sort of solve the problem in the longer term. I noticed that the Israeli leader of the opposition, Yair Lapid, has said, look, maybe we could accept 7 days, but certainly not 21 days, because 7 days would not give Hezbollah enough time to regroup and rearm.
Meantime, Sir Keir Starmer speaking in New York at the UN General Assembly, urging Britons in Lebanon to get out. But it doesn't seem to be that easy, does it? He's talking about commercial flights still flying out, which is true, but they are fully booked. I mean, we were reading this morning in the papers, people trying to leave Lebanon, they can't get a flight out for a week. And with things moving so rapidly, there's a real concern they're going to be trapped there.
Yes, I mean, the British Embassy has actually been telling British nationals to leave since the beginning of August. So this isn't new, but obviously the recent intensification of the fighting has accelerated the need for British nationals to leave. It seems that there's about 4,000 to 6,000 nationals there, some of whom will not want to leave under any circumstances for very different reasons. But those who can still leave are being urged to leave. You're right that the airport, of course, is overbooked. A lot of airlines are no longer flying to Beirut Airport for obvious reasons. There are still some ferries and boats leaving from northern Lebanon. So there are still 1 or 2 opportunities. But I think the government has been quite correct in preparing a more military-assisted emergency evacuation if the situation deteriorates further. And they do have some military assets now in the region, in Cyprus, in the Eastern Mediterranean, which could help to get some British nationals out if the situation gets even worse.
So Mark Lyle Grant, really good to see you this morning. Thank you so much for your assessment.
Thank you.
Now it's 18 minutes past 6. Let's have a look at some of the other stories heading into the newsroom.
And reports have emerged that New York Mayor Eric Adams has been indicted. That's following a federal corruption investigation by the FBI into the running of America's biggest city. It remains unclear what charges he could face. In a video message released overnight, he proclaimed his innocence and vowed to clear his name.
The Russian President Vladimir Putin has outlined changes to the country's nuclear doctrine. The Russian leader said it means Moscow could now respond using nuclear weapons if it was attacked by conventional arms. His announcement coincided with President Zelensky's appearance at the UN, where he said Russia must be forced into peace.
And finally, the former sub-postmaster Sir Alan Bates has been knighted after exposing the Horizon IT scandal. Sir Alan was given his honour by Princess Anne at a ceremony at Windsor Castle yesterday. He says while the news of his knighthood came out of the blue, he's excited to put it to good use.
Right, let's get a check on the weather for you this morning with Alex.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Morning, welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office. Here on GB News, we are expecting the rain to cause further issues over the next day and a half. Further heavy rain today, tonight and tomorrow morning is expected to cause further flooding. Met Office warnings are in place. Check the Met Office website or app for full details. Particularly wet today over northeast England, parts of Northern Ireland, North Wales, also seeing some heavy downpours. And in the south, a bit more showery in nature. There'll be some brighter spells, but here too, some heavy downpours are likely. Much of Scotland looking dry, some sunny spells on the west coast. It is quite cool here. Temperatures elsewhere struggling in the mid-teens, feeling pretty chilly with that persistent rain and the winds coming in from the North Sea over northeast England and the far southeast of Scotland. Further south, we will see some sunny spells through the day, but there'll still be some heavy downpours around as the rain builds up here, particularly tonight and tomorrow. The potential for further flooding, a wet zone over North Wales and northern England. As I said, looking a little drier across the southwest of Scotland. A scattering of showers in northern Scotland with that northerly wind bringing a chill. The wet weather this morning should clear away from Northern Ireland, but likely to linger in North Wales, northern England well into this evening, and then we're looking at some heavier bursts of rain developing over the Midlands and southern England and South Wales as we go through the night. Because it's been so wet this week, that is likely to cause some further flooding issues through the night and first thing in the morning. Temperatures just about holding up in double figures tonight, but further north it is turning colder. The northerly winds pushing the rain away, but also introducing a cooler feel. Some good spells of sunshine tomorrow over central and southern Scotland, a much brighter day over northeast England. The rain should also finally clear from southern parts after a wet start. So many areas becoming dry and bright by the afternoon, but also noticeably fresher with the winds coming down from the north. A distinctly cooler feel with temperatures struggling to get into the mid-teens. Many places only 11 or 12 Celsius. Bye for now.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Right, it's 20 minutes past 8. Apparently it's the 8 o'clock hour.
It is, actually, yes.
I got that wrong a minute ago.
I don't think anyone would have noticed.
I've totally lost the plot today. Partly because I'm dreaming of winning £36,000 in the Great British Giveaway. I'm not allowed to enter, sadly, because it would be like having an extra £3,000 in my bank account each month for a whole year tax-free.
Yes.
That would be nice.
That would be nice, but you can't enter.
No.
But you can, and here are all the details.
You could be the next Great British Giveaway winner with a whopping £36,000 in tax-free cash in your bank account. Imagine getting the winning phone call for that.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
SpaceX has completed its first private spacewalk. What do you mean you don't know what I'm talking about? Billionaire Jared Isaacman became the first non-professional astronaut to walk in space this morning. It was live on Britain's Newsroom. I didn't know what I was watching. Here's his reaction.
There's SpaceX. Back at home, we all have a lot of work to do, but from here, Earth sure looks like a perfect world.
So that was him coming out of his little capsule. He was attached to the capsule by what they call the umbilical, by a cord, and that was obviously the Earth in the background. It does raise the question, though, Tom, doesn't it? Can you justify the expense? We don't know the true figure that cost to get that spacecraft into air and to have this billionaire up there. We don't know, but let's just say it's in the hundreds of millions at least. How do you justify it when we can't get clean water to half the planet?
Just, Bev, to demonstrate that I'm not engaged here in the politics of envy. I mean, this is a private company, SpaceX. Elon Musk is a private individual. He's attracted these fees, if you like, to go up into space. So, absolutely, this is a plutocrat on a joyride in space that's been over the news. I think there's a broader issue here about, instead of joyrides in space, actually we should be solving, as you say, the water challenges, the educational challenges, the malarial challenges in part of this world, and indeed the challenges in our own country with a quadrupling of the number of people that are visiting food banks just in the last 10 years or so. So there are plenty of social problems. If entrepreneurs and billionaires have got money to give away, to throw away, they should be putting them into solving those very human problems on this planet.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Your lunchtime update on the stories that matter across the UK.
From breaking news and insightful analysis, inspiring stories and lively debates. You're comparing yourself to a former Prime Minister.
Which is it? Stay informed, stay updated, stay entertained.
I just don't know how anyone would not want to be there.
Every weekday from midday.
We are Good Afternoon Britain, only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now, the last 14 years of Conservative-led governments saw 5 prime ministers come and go in all sorts of circumstances and political battles.
Yes, well, David Cameron, Theresa May, Boris Johnson, very briefly Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak led the nation through some of the most significant moments in our history.
Well, one man who was there throughout it all was Graham Brady. Now, Lord Brady, to you, who for 14 years was the chairman of the 1922 committee, the governing body of the Conservative Parliamentary Party.
Well, today, Lord Brady's much-anticipated tell-all memoir is released. We're told it's explosive. Kingmaker, secrets, lies and the truth about 5 prime ministers, detailing the rise and the fall of those prime ministers.
Well, we're delighted that Lord Brady joins us now. Really good to see you this morning. Why did you want to write this book?
I mean, I think it's too good a story not to be told. And it's become my life story as well. And I wanted to tell it. And a lot of people over the years have stopped me in the street and said, I do hope you're going to write a book one day. So here it is.
What I'm intrigued by in all of this, as chair of the 1922 for 14 years, is that record-breaking in and of itself? I think it is. You're a man who has to keep your mouth shut about a lot of things. How much of that now have you really been comfortable about releasing?
Well, you say tell-all memoir. It's not. I'm not told everything, and in a sense,
Book 2.
You never know. But something I thought was very important to keep a confidence was that colleagues writing asking for a confidence vote can do so privately. So unless they went on telly saying I've just written to Graham Brady, I don't name them, and I think that's right and proper. But I do tell some things which I think should be on the record. Some things which are important, I think, for history. Some for students of politics. And one of the things I do when those letters were coming in is give the timeline. So you can tell how colleagues were responding to events, how the pressures on them were influencing their behaviour. And also, quite importantly, I think, I try to debunk the idea that a lot of people in the media and quite a lot of people in the public developed that my colleagues were trigger happy and they were always writing letters asking for confidence votes. Actually, they were very cautious and very responsible about it. I think they knew it was a very significant thing to do.
Because there is a lot of debunking of myths and there's a lot of debunking of rumour in this book, isn't there? And it's already made headlines with the revelation that there were some MPs who were briefing the press saying that there was a flurry of letters of no confidence in Rishi Sunak, and that's why he went early with the general election. But your book has revealed that there were only 10.
10 letters in my safe at the time. So, I mean, there were two falsehoods in the rumour. One was the idea that I told Rishi how many letters there were. I've never done that with any Prime Minister. I think the danger of doing that is it would influence their behaviour. And it would be very tempting for a chairman of the 1922 committee to say, you've got to change this policy, you've got to change that policy, the colleagues don't like it, you're going to be in trouble. But if you started doing that, I think it would mess the whole system up. It's got to be completely private. So that's the first thing. And the second was this idea, and it was Sir Simon Clarke, my colleague, who a few weeks or months before the election was called, said that there were 50 letters have been submitted. Well, of course, nobody else would have known. It's a completely secret process and only I knew.
What about the, I mean, one key part of your role as chair of the 22 was that you would have regular meetings with the Prime Minister, whoever that was. I mean, you were someone that had to be consulted and pass on the feelings of the party to Number 10. How much of that do we get the little snippets of? Because I remember seeing you at an event, do you remember, and you'd just come back from seeing Boris Johnson, and it turned out to be the night before he quit. And I mean, you had a twinkle in your eye. You knew, but even then, you were very quiet about it. Do we get any of those juicy little tidbits?
Well, I think when I saw you, I'd just come from a meeting with Boris where I told him what I thought was going to happen. And he had been absolutely determined that he was going nowhere and he was going to fight on. And so at that point, I was just thinking, I don't know how this is going to end, but it's going to be messy. And it was early the next morning that I had a phone call from Boris's office just saying the Prime Minister wants a word with you on the phone. He'll call you in about an hour's time. And I think it was then 8:30 that Boris phoned me and said, yeah, the conversation we had last night, I've changed my mind.
Wow.
So I think the logic and the pressure of events was such, and at that point he, I think, was struggling to get people to serve as ministers in his government.
What's it been like for you having a front row seat in history? Not even a seat, you're really there in the heart of the action. There's some fantastic photos in this book here. You announcing the result of the vote of confidence in Theresa May. I mean, these are moments in people's lives that they'll remember forever. You're a part of political history.
In one sense, that's good. You tell me I'm a part of history. It's a bit sad, but no, I've had. It's been exciting, and I can't complain. It was strange. My career took a fork in the road because in 2007 I resigned because the Conservative Party started being mean about grammar schools, and I was very strongly supportive of grammar schools. So I resigned so I could make the case for grammar schools and selective education, in particular, standing up for the ones in my own constituency at the time. And at that point, I thought my career was over. And a colleague suggested to me, why don't you stand to be chairman of the 1922 committee in 2010? And it's not something I'd ever planned, ever thought I would do. And when I started doing it, when I was first elected, I thought it might be for a year or two. 14 years later, after the most tumultuous period in British political history, I can't complain. It's been fascinating and very fulfilling, and I hope I've done a good job for the Conservative Party, but for the country as well.
What have you made of the various prime ministers? Because you do get to see them in a way that, of course, most of us never do. It's the behind-the-scenes stuff. It's the having a quiet chat in Number 10 and seeing how they operate, how they tick. Has anyone stood out for you in particular as either being particularly on the ball or particularly not on the ball?
Well, of course, I think what people tend to underestimate is that, or fail to recognise all the time, they are people. And, as human beings, they're all flawed, they all have their own frailties. Sir Keir Starmer's doing his best to remind us of that on a daily basis at the moment, making all of the former Conservative Prime Ministers look better with hindsight. But, I think they're all very different people. And, I think David Cameron, obviously the first who was there, he carried it very lightly most of the time. He seemed very relaxed and took it in his stride until suddenly he didn't. Then Theresa May, very proper, very dedicated to public service. She was determined to deliver the outcome of the referendum, but then called that 2017 general election, didn't have the majority to do what she needed to do. And the pressure that then built on her was immense. So you see some of the consequence of that, which is both a consequence in public policy terms, we couldn't do what we had to do, and the human consequence, both for her, for everybody in Parliament actually, was the most awful, painful time. And then Boris comes in, determined just to smash through and get everything done, and created his own problems in that, in my view, the COVID restrictions were too complex and too restrictive, and he then ended up getting caught in his own COVID restrictions. Liz Truss wasn't really there for long enough to...
But even that, what was that era like for you? 49 days she was in office.
Well, I mean, again, I try to relate that in the book. I didn't know Liz very well at the start of it. We were just starting to work out a working relationship and work out how it would work. I was starting to think, well, she's very forthright. Sometimes she'd just say, no, I don't agree. But then she was prepared to listen a little bit when you came back with a compromise idea. So I was starting to think, well, you might make this work. And then everything just suddenly collapsed. There was the mini budget and then bizarre circumstances around a not very important vote in the Commons on an opposition day motion about fracking, where the whole operation just suddenly broke, descended into chaos, and it was obvious that it was over.
It's been a mess, hasn't it? Oh, an interesting time, but a mess nonetheless. Just a final thought about who do you salute in the book? Do you give a mention to those people who've been by your side? Because, as you know, as well as I do, there've been two women who've supported you throughout all of this, one of whom is the great Lady Victoria. But there's somebody else who's been a stalwart for you. And I wonder if she gets a mention.
She does. The wonderful Sybil Crowther, MBE, who has been my assistant secretary ever since I started in the House of Commons 27 years ago. And now that I'm in the House of Lords, she's going to carry on doing a little bit for me. And I was talking about this last night when I saw her. I think you previously said on air that she's 82 years old.
Yes.
So she's magnificent.
Yes.
Everybody loves her, and she's carrying on.
She's still going.
Yeah. No, she never stops. She never stops. Graham, it's always a pleasure to see you. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's always nice to give our Sybil a mention. Very good friend of mine.
And Kingmaker is out today.
Yes. Oh, yes.
We should just
mention
say that. Yeah.
There you go. Right, still to come. We're going to be joined by former Lioness Carly Telford, as well as, of course, as the wonderful Paul Coit. That's next.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. Trains have been stopped between Carlisle and both Glasgow Central and Edinburgh Waverley because of overhead line problems. In Tyne and Wear, the A188 is closed along Chilling Road at Heaton after an accident. County Down, the A48 is closed along Moat Street at Donegal with a fallen tree. On the M1 in Derbyshire, there's a lane closed southbound where a lorry is broken down between junctions 29 and 28 near Mansfield. It's taking around half an hour in the delays. The M25 in Essex is blocked each way between junctions 28 and 27 between the A12 and M11 after an accident. They're accused from junction 30 for the A13 and from junction 27 for the M11. The M2 in Kent is closed westbound at junction 1 for the A2 at Strood after an accident. Diversions are often back on by the split roads, causing roughly 2 miles of queues, with the A2 closed eastbound towards there from Gravesend. And train services are suspended southbound from Gloucester to Swindon after a freight train broke down.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, and as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there short and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tune in to Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan.
GB News royalty with
your perfect start to the weekend.
Lucky us.
Feisty and fearless guests.
Well, I'm a normal person, so ask me.
Honest opinions.
That raises more questions than a Gary Barlow tax return.
And a few surprises along the way.
Might be cold in this studio.
That is Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan. 8 to 9, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
All right, time for the sport this morning. Paul Coit is here. Should we have a little bit of football?
Yes, let's do that. Last night, we had Arsenal playing. They played Bolton Wanderers last night. 5-1 was the score. 2 Carabao Cup games. Both ended up 5-1. So Arsenal beat Bolton 5-1. And they had the kids were playing. And they had 17-year-olds, they had 18-year-olds.
16-year-olds.
16-year-old Jack Porter, who was the goalkeeper for Arsenal yesterday at the age of 16 years and 72 days.
Oh, I love
to be exact.
Love the fact they count the days.
It always happens whenever you have young footballers. It will always have the days along with that as well. But so they came through 5-1, which is always Teams and supporters always worry because then you get, you're not putting the full team out. This is the Carabao Cup. Whereas it worked very well for Arsenal and Mikel Arteta was extremely happy with it. No, let's hear from, do we have Mikel Arteta and we can hear what he said about playing the kids yesterday?
A really positive night in every sense, the result, the performance. We gave minutes as well to a lot of senior players and they really showed a lot of quality tonight. And on top of that, as you said, we gave the opportunity to quite a lot of academy players. They responded really well and it's just so fulfilling to see their faces, their reaction, how much it means to them. So, great night.
I've never seen him so happy. He looks so happy. I haven't. I didn't know. I'd never seen his teeth before. So Liverpool 5, West Ham 1 was the other result. And Manchester United drew in the Europa League last night with FC Twente from where? Enschede. Enschede. And Spurs play Karabag, who are from Azerbaijan at 8 o'clock tonight. Now, also something I want to mention is that WSL season, which has got underway. Yeah. WSL season. There's a new survey which has revealed there's still a large amount of gender inequality in football. Former Chelsea and England goalkeeper, the excellent Carly Telford joins us right now. Morning, Carly.
Good morning, guys. How are we?
Very well. Look, it's great to see you. Before we get on to this and we talk about the bad stuff, I want to talk about the good stuff first, because I'm thinking the way your career has gone, you've probably seen a bigger change in the women's game than probably any other pro, because you've seen it from when there was nothing right up to where we are now.
Yeah, definitely. Talking about young Jack there, also, I think I was 14 when I made my first team debut, which says a lot. One, of how old I am, and two, probably how unprofessional it was back then. But yeah, I've seen it all. Like I say, very amateur, playing on Sunday league fields, trying to fight for pitches, to playing now at the likes of Stamford Bridge, the Emirates, Wembley. It's been a huge change for everyone, but it's great to see, and it's where it needs to be.
Where do you think that big change was? I always say that it was the World Cup around 2015. This is when everybody started taking notice, and then the women's game just went like that straight after. Is it what you felt? Did you feel there was a huge change at that time?
Yeah, I think 2015 in Canada, winning the bronze medal. It's the first time we'd medalled at a World Cup in a lot of years since the guys won it in '66. And then you go to kind of 2019 in France, where we had 12 million people watch us in a semi-final against the USA. And then you move on to what the Lionesses did in 2022 when they won the Euro. So it's constantly been building. But yeah, there's still a long way to go. And this grassroots kind of research that Sure have done, it just shows that. So it's in a great place, but we've got a lot of work to do still as well.
Now the research then is this is on women's football, right? And this is not just grassroots. This is mainly in grassroots when it comes to girls and women playing. What seems to be the main problem? What seems to change here? What needs to be changed?
It's access. Look, a lot of young girls now have role models, see opportunities. They see the girls playing in the WSL every week on TV, on BBC and Sky, but there's still an access problem. And I think it's not just for women's football, it's probably football at grassroots in general, right? Especially we come into the winter months. How many grass pitches are now going to be out of service because of flooding, etc. So are there enough winter pitches and all surface pitches and indoor areas where young girls and boys can train together? But for us, it's mainly about girls, because men's and boys football always comes first right now, and there's a lot of local areas that don't kind of put the women's at the forefront of their minds. But what the Lionesses did in 2022 and all got their own pitches, so now they have access across kind of the country to their pitches individually, but young girls now get access and first dibs at that, which they've never had before. So I think that's a small change, but hopefully it'll go on to do big things.
And it's much wider things as well, isn't it, Kylie, that perhaps you wouldn't think about. It certainly wouldn't be an issue for men's football, but things like a lack of coaches, referees and trainers.
Yeah, I was quite alarmed to see that 4 out of 10 girls' games actually get cancelled because there's a lack of referees, lack of coaches. I think it's funding, it's kind of investment. And it's kind of grassroots is all about volunteers, right? My coaches at grassroots level are all volunteers. They work through the day and then they go and coach their young teams at night. And how many can do that across both boys, girls, men's and women's football consistently? So it's up to the likes of the FA and the WSL clubs maybe to look into investing in their coaches, into referees, and how do we help that out to make sure that we've got good pathways for young girls.
Your Chelsea career, though, I mean, you're Chelsea really through and through, because you've been at Chelsea, then you move away, and then you're back in Chelsea again. Yeah. How are you feeling about the season this year? Because the WSL got underway, didn't it, at the weekend?
Yeah, no, I don't sound like I'm very Chelsea, but yeah, no,
you've got that West London accent, though, I can tell there, Carly. I recognise it straight away.
The Geordie West London accent, yeah, it's quite the combination. Yeah, it's a fantastic start for us. Look, Villa are going to be a very difficult proposition this year for any team. They've recruited really well, but that's where we want to be, right? No one wants to turn up every year, and I know we've won it for the past 5 years in a row, Chelsea have, but we want it to be competitive. We want it going to the last game of the season, goal difference, last points, and that's what makes it exciting. It's made the Premier League exciting for however many years it's been going now. We want the WSL to have the same thing. So look, we've got a new manager in place. She's won the Champions League, the one thing that Emma couldn't win with Chelsea. So now we're hoping that that's going to be in the bag this season. But look, this team's growing as we have to keep everyone chasing us. But yeah, we're going for the 6th this season, and hopefully an FA Cup and a Conti Cup too as well.
And finally, what highlight have you had of your career? Because I love the fact, like I mentioned earlier, the fact that how the women's game's changed, and you were in the middle of this, from playing from probably there was nobody watching to playing in packed stadiums, which is incredible. What was the highlight for you?
It's quite a sad one, really, but I finally got to play in a FA Cup final at Wembley, and my mum and dad turned around and said to me, when I was really little and used to watch it on TV, I turned around and said to them when I was 9 or 10 that I was going to play there one day. And of course they didn't laugh at me, but behind the scenes they were kind of like, that's not going to happen. And I got to walk out at Wembley and win the FA Cup and kind of lift it in front of my mum and dad. And I lost my mum the year after, actually, so she finally got me, I guess she got to see me fulfill a dream that she thought she never would. So that's probably always going to be my highlight, my first FA Cup and the one the mum and dad got to see me do. So although it's sad, it was quite a happy memory for me.
Carly, really lovely to speak to you. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, guys. Take care. Bye.
Thank you.
That's very sweet. Carly Telford there.
What a superstar.
Yeah, absolutely.
Isn't it nice when they're nice, these people of influence and fame and talent?
Yeah, you see them from time to time. I always say that when it comes to footballers and very successful sports people, it's more impressive when you see them being normal and nice than it is that it's annoying when they're not because the way they have everything handed to them. So when you see them like that, it means a lot more.
Yeah, it certainly does. Paul, thank you very much indeed.
Thanks. By the way, you're working for EasyJet? What's going on?
Yes, we are.
Yeah.
OK, I just want...
Chicken or beef?
OK. Feather or leather. There you go.
Right, we're going to be back with the papers for you in just a moment.
I'm Michael Portillo. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get the book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
Well, the first thing on in my mind when I heard about this is what has this country come to when we're talking about getting kids as young as 6 years old to be jabbed weekly or however often it is because they are too fat. Where are the parents in all of this? There's three things actually here that are important. Number one is we do not know the long-term consequences of these jabs. So if I had a child and I was going to let them have the jab, I would be feeling like I'm treating them like a lab rat, to be quite honest with you, because we don't know the long-term consequences. Secondly, the manufacturers are clear that some of the potential side effects can be very serious. We're talking about potentially pancreatitis, let's get my word out, and also it lists as a potential side effect thyroid cancer. Arguably, it's called the gamble jab, to be honest with you, because of these potential side effects at the moment. And then thirdly, I come back to the parents. Where are the parents in all of this? Because they are the role models. So it really is about parenting, and it's about parenting from being a role model yourself in terms of being slim and healthy and not expecting a jab to take your place and other people to take your place. If you have children, they are your responsibility. Think before you breed. The other thing you need to remember with this is when you stop taking that jab, it is highly likely that you're going to put all the weight back on. Now, the thought of a child of 6 years of age, starting with that jab, conditioning them mentally to live with that jab, as far as I'm concerned, is absolutely not on.
GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop star to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts.
This is GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Arlene Foster on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. We're going through the papers. It's a whistle-stop tour this morning with Emma and Pat. Good to see you both. Emma, let's start with the Daily Telegraph, shall we? And this is about a couple who were fined after reporting a stowaway migrant.
I'm not often lost for words. This is an astonishing story.
We know.
This is a couple. Do I talk too much? That's what.
No, never.
This is an astonishing story. This couple, older couple who are antiques dealers, and the man, the chap, is often on the BBC's bidding room, so he's obviously on telly talking about antiques. They're a couple returning from France. They'd been on an antique trip, foraging trip. They had their van and they heard a noise. They thought someone was trying to get in. They said, "Oi, get out." And a migrant apparently sort of ran off. Anyway, they travelled through. They were held up, lengthy delays at the border in Calais. Then they travelled back to England. They were checked various points on the French border. And somewhere in Suffolk, I think they stopped for petrol or something. And they found there was a migrant in the back of... They heard noises. There was a migrant in the back of their van. They reported it to the police. The guy ran off. The police caught him. They were fined £3,000 by the police...
For bringing him over.
...for unknowingly smuggling a migrant back into this country.
That cannot be right.
No.
Absolutely astonishing, really. They were checked. The van was checked several times at both borders.
That's a failing of border force, then.
As they're saying, they should have been found there.
Yeah.
No, they should have been... I mean, the bottom line to that, Pat, is that if that happened to you, you'd let them run off and not report it then, for fear, and otherwise you get a fine. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, that's clear. Yeah, absolutely.
The man said he's been made to feel like a criminal despite his efforts to behave responsibly, and that it's it's the and the police are saying it's the driver's responsibility, whether they're tourists or whether it's a commercial van, it's their responsibility to secure their vehicle.
Yeah, well,
shocking.
I think it's terrible.
Absolutely.
Pat, in the Sun, there's been a lot about this. Philip Schofield back on the box.
So Channel 5, 3 nights, 1 ex-TV presenter, and he's on a beach in Madagascar, an island off Madagascar. This is a strange one for me because I was a little bit wary when I first saw it and thought, what's all this about? Because I thought maybe he would come back and do the jungle or something, but it's kind of his own sort of jungle by himself. So they give him cameras. There's no crew, no direction. I'm hoping he's got enough battery, otherwise it's going to be a problem if he suddenly goes... Because what would he do, technically, if he's been told to film himself and just, I suppose... look at his life and speak and talk all the time for 24 hours a day, and then there's a problem with the equipment. There's no one to call. He's got no phone. He's got nothing. It's just him. So is this, a little more behind this? Maybe are there people hiding behind the bushes handing out pieces?
Maybe.
Like they think they do in the jungle, but they don't because I've done it, and you don't get any pieces.
Do you think someone in his position should? I mean, he's got pockets of
loads
cash.
of money. Yeah.
Why is he just not sitting quietly and disappearing into the sunset?
Because the audience is going to learn about his past and his future, and he's going to be forthcoming and give his emotions as to what happened, and wants to speak his piece. But there's nobody to ask him any questions, so it would just be him speaking to a camera. I think a lot of people will watch this to see what it's going to be like. But I had no idea. He says, I've had a lot of time to think about what went wrong, and now I'm going to spill the beans from my point of view.
Emma, do you think he can be uncancelled?
Well, I think it'll always dog him. There is an argument that 16 months on, he feels as though he's gone away, done his reflection, and now he wants to talk. I suspect it's in his blood that he's just dying to get back on our screens again. But yeah, there are lots of questions still around, what happened to the other person in this affair? What happened to...
Well, that's the issue there was he paid out the young man, but with a non-disclosure agreement for both sides. So if he starts talking about it, it opens the doors for him to... Of course.
But also, I don't know which channel this is.
Channel 5.
Channel 5.
Yeah.
They'll want their pound of flesh, so they'll obviously be wanting him to talk about things that are sensitive and I think lots of people will be tuning in.
Yeah. Well, they will. It'll be interesting in a weird way. I just think he's not doing himself any favours.
No. And interesting, he's decided to go with Channel 5 despite those rumours that he'd be going in the jungle with ITV.
Well, that would have been messy because
it would have been messy.
Other people would have been asking questions.
Look, thank you both. It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Let's have a look at the weather.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Morning, welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office. Here on GB News, we are expecting the rain to cause further issues over the next day and a half. Further heavy rain today, tonight and tomorrow morning is expected to cause further flooding. Met Office warnings are in place. Check the Met Office website or app for full details. Particularly wet today over North East England, parts of Northern Ireland, North Wales, also seeing some heavy downpours. And in the south, a bit more showery in nature. There'll be some brighter spells, but here too, some heavy downpours are likely. Much of Scotland looking dry, some sunny spells on the west coast. It is quite cool here. Temperatures elsewhere struggling in the mid-teens, feeling pretty chilly with that persistent rain and the winds coming in from the North Sea over North East England and the far southeast of Scotland. Further south, we will see some sunny spells through the day, but there'll still be some heavy downpours around as the rain builds up here, particularly tonight and tomorrow. The potential for further flooding, a wet zone over North Wales and northern England. As I said, looking a little drier across the southwest of Scotland. A scattering of showers in northern Scotland with that northerly wind bringing a chill. The wet weather this morning should clear away from Northern Ireland, but likely to linger in North Wales, northern England well into this evening, and then we're looking at some heavier bursts of rain developing over the Midlands and southern England and South Wales as we go through the night. Because it's been so wet this week, that is likely to cause some further flooding issues through the night and first thing in the morning. Temperatures just about holding up in double figures tonight, but further north it is turning colder. The northerly winds pushing the rain away, but also introducing a cooler feel. Some good spells of sunshine tomorrow over central and southern Scotland. A much brighter day over northeast England. The rain should also finally clear from southern parts after a wet start. So many areas becoming dry and bright by the afternoon, but also noticeably fresher with the winds coming down from the north. A distinctly cooler feel with temperatures struggling to get into the mid-teens. Many places only 11 or 12 Celsius. Bye for now.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. Trains have been stopped between Carlisle and both Glasgow Central and Edinburgh Waverley because of overhead line problems. In County Down, the A48 is blocked by a fallen tree along Moat Street at Donegal D. On the M1 in Derbyshire, the inside lane's closed southbound where a lorry's broken down between junctions 29 and 28 near Mansfield. It's taken about half an hour in queues from junction 30. Worksop train services are suspended southbound from Gloucester to Swindon where a freight train's broken down. On the M4 in Cardiff, 2 out of 5 lanes are closed eastbound after an accident at junction 33 west of Cardiff with queues back beyond junction 34. The M25 in Essex is closed each way between junctions 28 and 27 between the A12 and M11 after an accident. There are queues from junction 30 for the A13 and from junction 27 for the M11. The M2 in Kent is closed westbound at junction 1 at Strood with the A2 closed eastbound towards there from Gravesend, causing delays.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Desning and good luck.
The Britain I grew up was the most peaceful, gentle society that has ever existed. That has been destroyed.
Opinion polls show immigration is the #1 concern to the British public. Are you proud to be British?
Yeah, I'm ever so proud.
My name is Stephen Edgington, and in this documentary, I want to find out how Britain became a nation of immigrants. Immigration, the truth, available at gbnews.com.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry, Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Good morning to you. Dozens of prisoners are mistakenly freed thanks to an error in the government's early release scheme.
With one person understood to have already reoffended and 5 still on the loose as the prison crisis deepens.
Well, ministers are scrambling to avoid further overcrowding. The Justice Secretary considering a points-based system to reduce an inmate's time behind bars.
The Prime Minister is in New York for the UN General Assembly, where top of the agenda is avoiding all-out war in the Middle East.
In relation to Lebanon, I'm very worried about the escalation and calling for all parties to step back from the brink to de-escalate. We need a ceasefire so this can be sorted out diplomatically.
Well, that's as US officials say a temporary ceasefire deal along the Israel-Lebanon border could come within hours.
Former chair of the 1922 committee, Lord Brady, celebrates the release of his much-anticipated memoir, Kingmaker. He joined us on Breakfast earlier.
The presenter, Philip Schofield, faces a backlash after announcing his return to television.
It's revealed 3/4 of female footballers think opportunities are greater for their male counterpart. We've been speaking to former Lioness Carly Telford.
Well, it's fascinating talking to Lord Brady a little bit earlier on, and we are going to replay some of that for you in a couple of minutes. It's an inside scoop on what actually happens in Parliament and all these prime ministers that he's seen come and go. It's
Yeah.
just absolutely fascinating.
It is, isn't it? Let's go to our top story now. Number 10 has admitted to releasing 37 prisoners out by mistake, several of which have still not been returned to jail. This is all part of the government's controversial early release scheme.
Well, in response, the Ministry of Justice has claimed to be working in tandem with the police to urgently return those inmates.
Well, you'd hope so. This comes as Labour is drawing up plans to introduce a Texas-style prison system with a points-based approach for good behaviour.
Well, the government's also apparently looking into rehabilitation projects. It wants to invest in those in a bid to curb overcrowding in prisons.
So we're asking this morning, is Labour really in control of law and order? Let's speak now to our political correspondent, Olivia Utley. Good to see you this morning, Olivia. Very concerning news this morning that 37 prisoners were let out of prison by mistake and 5 are still being worked on to be actually tracked down. They're still out there.
Well, exactly. I mean, there were lots of warnings that something like this might happen because the early release scheme was implemented so quickly. It was a possible Labour policy when the election was called in July, and then it was implemented 2 months later on the 10th of September. There were countless warnings from parole officers saying that they just weren't prepared for this to happen and the ducks weren't in a row. And now, sure enough, it has happened. This is obviously a very bad look for Labour, and the pressure is on, the spotlight is on the Prime Minister to see what happens with all of these prisoners who were released early. Within 36 hours, there was one of these prisoners released under the early release scheme who was back in prison, having already broken his parole conditions. Obviously, breaking parole conditions, you might not think that's that important, but if any of these prisoners who were released early end up committing some sort of bad crime, perhaps violent crime, then there will be very much a spotlight on the Prime Minister questioning the wisdom of that decision.
But what I can't get my head around is how anyone... I mean, there must be lists produced, stuff sent round with a list of people. Right, these are the people who are eligible for release. So how have people not on the list got out?
I mean, it's a very good question. There was a bit of a grey area in terms of the list of people who were eligible, in that, those who had been convicted for non-violent offences were eligible. But in some cases, someone was convicted of a non-violent offence but had violence in their background. And so they were sort of on the wrong list for someone who was arrested and ended up in prison for a burglary but might have had a weapon at that burglary, for instance, and they ended up getting on the wrong list. So there was this grey area. But essentially the problem set in because it was all done so quickly, and lots of the parole officers were saying, this is a fine policy, we don't have any issue with it ideologically, but we just need more time to implement it. But Labour felt that they just didn't have that time, and they might have been right. There was a time a month or so ago when there were just 150 places left in male prisons across the country. There was a very, very serious overcrowding issue, and that's why the Labour government felt that it had to act so quickly.
And now the government are looking abroad for tips on how to reform the prison system. Texas is where they're looking at the moment. Tell us a bit more about that.
Yeah, so really interesting story in the Times today. Obviously, when you think of prisoners in Texas, you automatically think of sort of death row. That is obviously not what the Prime Minister is looking at, because Texas actually has a pretty liberal policy when it comes to less serious offenders. And what that involves is allowing those offenders to undertake courses in prison, so drug rehabilitation courses, sort of agricultural courses, educational courses, and in doing that, they earn credits, and those credits amount to days. They essentially buy back days of their sentence in prison. So basically good behaviour points, and those points can count against their sentence. So some prisoners in Texas are getting out in under 25% of their sentence, with some of that 25% being counted towards these extra credits. At the moment, the default in the UK is to release prisoners. It was 50% of their sentence. It's now, because of this early release scheme for some prisoners anyway, 40% of their sentence. There is a possibility now that it could be brought down to something like 25%. It'd be really, really interesting to see how that goes down, because obviously the move to bring it down from 50% to 40% was controversial in itself.
Yeah. Talking of things that are controversial, winter fuel payments. The government seems determined to push ahead with this, but they're getting a lot of pushback from the unions now.
A huge amount of pushback. So I was at Labour conference yesterday, and there was a vote organised by two of the major unions for Labour members in the hall. It was absolutely packed. This was Wednesday, the last day of the conference. Usually you would see the conference hall emptying out, but it was totally packed. And the unions won that motion. So Labour members voted against implementing Keir Starmer's removal of the winter fuel payments for pensioners not on pension credit. Now, that doesn't technically mean anything in that Keir Starmer can push ahead with it anyway, and he did get it through the Commons with relative ease, although 53 Labour MPs did abstain. But he did manage to get it through the Commons with ease because of this enormous majority that he's got. But it's not a good sign for a new Prime Minister. I find this really fascinating. The feeling at conference felt like the Conservative conference last year. It felt like the dying days of a government where the party sort of disillusioned and beginning to sort of move against the Prime Minister. And that's the feeling among Labour members in the hall yesterday, which is bizarre given that Keir Starmer won this enormous majority just 2.5 months ago.
Well, this is humiliating for the government, isn't it? It'd almost be too late now for them to U-turn, despite the outcry from the public and despite the outcry from unions. They seem set on this.
Well, exactly. And Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves are absolutely digging their heels in. On the media round yesterday, Keir Starmer refused 4 times to apologise to pensioners. And it could be that this story isn't yet over, that they haven't yet weathered this storm. They have had these 53 abstentions in Parliament, which was pretty embarrassing, and one Labour MP actually voted with the Conservatives. Then they've had this vote by Labour members against implementing the policy. And then, I mean, we're only at the end of September now. If we get into a cold winter, Ofgem have already said that the price cap for energy bills has been raised, meaning that energy bills will be more expensive for ordinary people. If we get into a really cold winter, that could be a perfect storm. And the fact that Keir Starmer has withdrawn those winter fuel payments for pensioners could actually end up with disastrous consequences. It's only September now. Let's see where we are in January or February.
OK. Olivia, thank you very much indeed.
Thank
you. Sort of hope with a new government, whatever you think of them, but at least it's a sort of fresh slate. You sort of start again. But the turmoil continues. So
it certainly does, yeah. We should be sensing some optimism, shouldn't we? But it's doom and gloom. Now, 9 minutes past 9, there is some good news this morning, and that is there's still plenty of time to grab a chance to win an incredible £36,000 in the Great British Giveaway.
Yeah, that is the equivalent of £3,000 tax-free in your bank account every month for a whole year. If you want to know how you could make that happen, here are the details.
You could be the next Great British Giveaway winner with a whopping £36,000 in tax-free cash in your bank account. Imagine getting the winning phone call for that.
Yes, best of luck to you. Now, the last 14 years of Conservative-led governments saw 5 Prime Ministers come and go in all sorts of circumstances and political battles.
Well, one man who was there through it all was Graham Brady, then Sir Graham Brady, now Lord Brady, who for 14 years was chairman of the 1922 committee. That's the governing body of the Conservative backbench party.
Well, today, Lord Brady's much-anticipated memoir is released. It's called Kingmaker, Secrets, Lies and the Truth About 5 Prime Ministers.
Well, we talked to him earlier on the show. Key part of your role as chair of the 22 was that you would have regular meetings with the Prime Minister, whoever that was. I mean, you were someone that had to be consulted and pass on the feelings of the party to number 10. How much of that do we get the little snippets of? Because I remember seeing you at an event, do you remember, and you'd just come back from seeing Boris Johnson, and it turned out to be the night before he quit. And I mean, you had a twinkle in your eye. You knew, but even then, you were very quiet about it. Do we get any of those juicy little tidbits?
Well, I think when I saw you, I'd just come from a meeting with Boris where I told him what I thought was going to happen. And he had been absolutely determined that he was going nowhere and he was going to fight on. And so at that point, I was just thinking, I don't know how this is going to end, but it's going to be messy. And it was early the next morning that I had a phone call from Boris's office just saying the Prime Minister wants a word with you on the phone. He'll call you in about an hour's time. And I think it was then 8:30 that Boris phoned me and said, yeah, the conversation we had last night, I've changed my mind.
Wow.
So I think the logic and the pressure of events was such, and at that point he, I think, was struggling to get people to serve as ministers in his government.
What's it been like for you having a front row seat in history? Not even a seat, you're really there in the heart of the action. There's some fantastic photos in this book here. You announcing the result of the vote of confidence in Theresa May. I mean, these are moments in people's lives that they'll remember forever. You're a part of political history.
In one sense, that's good. You tell me I'm a part of history. It's a bit sad, but no, I've had. It's been exciting, and I can't complain. It was strange. My career took a fork in the road because in 2007 I resigned because the Conservative Party started being mean about grammar schools, and I was very strongly supportive of grammar schools. So I resigned so I could make the case for grammar schools and selective education, in particular, standing up for the ones in my own constituency at the time. And at that point, I thought my career was over. And a colleague suggested to me, why don't you stand to be chairman of the 1922 committee in 2010? And it's not something I'd ever planned, ever thought I would do. And when I started doing it, when I was first elected, I thought it might be for a year or two. 14 years later, after the most tumultuous period in British political history, I can't complain. It's been fascinating and very fulfilling, and I hope I've done a good job for the Conservative Party, but for the country as well.
What have you made of the various prime ministers? Because you do get to see them in a way that, of course, most of us never do. It's the behind-the-scenes stuff. It's the having a quiet chat in Number 10 and seeing how they operate, how they tick. Has anyone stood out for you in particular as either being particularly on the ball or particularly not on the ball?
Well, of course, I think what people tend to underestimate is that, or fail to recognise all the time, they are people. And, as human beings, they're all flawed, they all have their own frailties. Sir Keir Starmer's doing his best to remind us of that on a daily basis at the moment, making all of the former Conservative Prime Ministers look better with hindsight. But, I think they're all very different people. And, I think David Cameron, obviously the first who was there, he carried it very lightly most of the time. He seemed very relaxed and took it in his stride until suddenly he didn't. Then Theresa May, very proper, very dedicated to public service. She was determined to deliver the outcome of the referendum, but then called that 2017 general election, didn't have the majority to do what she needed to do. And the pressure that then built on her was immense. So you see some of the consequence of that, which is both a consequence in public policy terms, we couldn't do what we had to do, and the human consequence, both for her, for everybody in Parliament, actually, was the most awful, painful time. And then Boris comes in, determined just to smash through and get everything done, and created his own problems in that, in my view, the COVID restrictions were too complex and too restrictive, and he then ended up getting caught in his own COVID restrictions. Liz Truss wasn't really there for long enough to...
But even that, what was that era like for you? 49 days she was in office.
Well, I mean, again, I try to relate that in the book. I didn't know Liz very well at the start of it. We were just starting to work out a working relationship and work out how it would work. I was starting to think, well, she's very forthright. Sometimes she'd just say, no, I don't agree. But then she was prepared to listen a little bit when you came back with a compromise idea. So I was starting to think, well, you might make this work. And then everything just suddenly collapsed. There was the mini budget and then bizarre circumstances around a not very important vote in the Commons on an Opposition Day motion about fracking, where the whole operation just suddenly broke, descended into chaos, and it was obvious that it was over.
It's been a mess, hasn't it? Oh, an interesting time, but a mess nonetheless.
And we should say that Kingmaker is out today. Isn't it?
There you go. It's interesting, fascinating to get a little insight into what goes on behind the scenes, I think.
Definitely is.
Anyway, do you want to meet a man on a mission?
I do.
Because coming up, we'll meet the man who's decided on climbing a whole load of mountains in the UK, including Snowdon, enough times to make them the equivalent height of Everest.
But why? We'll find out next.
Good Afternoon Britain.
Your lunchtime update on the stories that matter across the UK.
From breaking news and insightful analysis, inspiring stories and lively debates. You're comparing yourself to a former Prime Minister.
Which is it? Stay informed, stay updated, stay entertained.
I just don't know how anyone would not want to be there.
Every weekday from midday.
We are Good Afternoon Britain, only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
Professor Frank Furedi has long been recognised for his incisive critiques on contemporary cultural and political issues. In his latest book, titled Why the West Must Fight for Its History, he argues that we are currently facing a profound crisis of identity, exacerbated by the growing trend of historical revisionism. And he joins me now. Welcome to GB News. So would you like to set out, as briefly as possible, the argument in your book?
My argument is basically that increasingly cultural conflicts are about the past, rather than simply about what's going on now. And I became aware of the fact that just about every dimension of our past, our legacy, our cultural achievements, is now being rendered toxic by a systematic attempt to contaminate who we are, where we come from. And to me, that's a very dangerous development. And what's also very dangerous is that all of our cultural institutions, the schools, universities, museums, are going along with this. And there's very little resistance to this whole process. And if that continues, then, in a sense, people growing up in today's world will feel a sense of shame about their nation, about where they come from. Britain did many things over the centuries which we shouldn't be proud of. But when you roll the film backwards and you look at the history of this nation, I think that there is a lot to be proud about. And it's not even a question of balancing good and bad. It's simply having an honest understanding that these achievements, from the Magna Carta onwards, are historically important. You cannot have an idea of tolerance without the contribution of someone like John Locke. You know, you cannot have a sense of technological progress without the Industrial Revolution.
GB News, the People's Channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
I'm Michael Portillo. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Now, the Hollywood actress Dame Joan Collins has been speaking to GB News about her iconic career, and she also gave her thoughts on the current political climate.
Yes, you can watch it in full on Britain's Newsroom later this morning, but here's a teaser.
Tell me about the modern world now. It's very fashionable now to call you all actors.
I don't call myself an actor.
You're an actor.
I call, if I'm in a room with some actors and actresses, I call us actors.
Right.
And I do sometimes call myself a jobbing actor, but on the whole, I like to be called an actress.
Yeah.
It's a very pretty word.
Yeah.
It's, and it's feminine, and I consider myself to be feminine and a feminist. And why should we be called female actors? I find it demeaning, frankly.
Yeah. A bit too, and do you think this wokery thing has got a bit too much of this wokery?
Good God, yes.
Yeah.
You know I do.
I do.
I think it's gone out of control.
Yeah.
Really. You can't say anything. People get offended.
Yeah.
We've lost our British sense of humour.
Right.
You know, I grew up with my father going to, because he was an agent for variety halls, and so we would go and we would see outrageous comedians making, you know, jokes about their mother-in-law and fat people. You can't say that now. You can't say any of the stuff.
No.
So I grew up watching those from the age of 11 or 12. Daddy had all these different acts and things that he would do, and it was great fun. And then, of course, as soon as I went to Hollywood, there was Milton Berle, who was the most outrageous comedian and dressed up as a female, and there's no way you could do any of that today. I think, you know, some of the things are fine, but I think lost our sense of humour tremendously, don't you?
I do, and I think
I'm so glad you still got it.
We have to push back at it, and as you know, sometimes I probably say the wrong thing. And
you get hate mail, don't you?
I do get hate mail, but that's fine. We don't mind that. We get used to it.
Well, as you were probably wondering, it was Andrew Pearce on the left of your screen during that interview, and he's here now with Bev Turner to talk about what's coming up in the show. And I have to say, that's fascinating.
That is.
Yeah, we're going to run out the entire interview with her because she's got a one-woman show is coming up at the Adelphi Theatre on October the 22nd, so it's to promote that. I've already bought my tickets. It's virtually sold out already.
Oh, wow. Yes.
The thing is, Joan Collins has worked with and met just about everybody.
Yeah.
It's extraordinary.
It's just one of those characters. You don't get stars like that anymore, do you?
She's part of that golden Hollywood glamorous era, isn't she?
Such wisdom.
Yeah.
I can't wait to watch it. I've not seen the whole thing, so we'll be showing that on Britain's Newsroom this morning. I think we're doing it in 2 sections.
We are. We're also talking about the inexplicable behaviour of the Prime Minister. I mean, this is just weird.
You mean the flat thing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The penthouse.
He's obviously had his nose in Lord Ali's trough for years.
It would appear so.
There's questions about this, isn't it? Because it was the son studying for his GCSEs, but apparently the calendar dates don't time up with GCSE
and then
exams.
they were there for a month after the GCSEs.
And COVID lockdown.
And also, because his son was being the presser outside his house. What does he think the press do if they're outside someone's house? We don't play a brass band. Why would that disturb his son revising for his GCSEs? He's just got addicted to glamour and money.
And there's an amazing story this morning about a couple who had a migrant jump in the back of their car. You covered this story.
Put it in the papers this morning, yeah.
And they were fined for it. I mean,
even though they reported it.
They reported it. And also the prisoners that were freed by mistake. And we've got Michelle Donnellan on the panel with us this morning.
Former Cabinet Minister.
Brilliant stuff.
Great.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thanks, you too.
Right, here's the weather.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Morning, welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office. Here on GB News, we are expecting the rain to cause further issues over the next day and a half. Further heavy rain today, tonight and tomorrow morning is expected to cause further flooding. Met Office warnings are in place. Check the Met Office website or app for full details. Particularly wet today over north-east England, parts of Northern Ireland, North Wales, also seeing some heavy downpours. And in the south, a bit more showery in nature. There'll be some brighter spells, but here too, some heavy downpours are likely. Much of Scotland looking dry, some sunny spells on the west coast. It is quite cool here. Temperatures elsewhere struggling in the mid-teens, feeling pretty chilly with that persistent rain and the winds coming in from the North Sea over north-east England and the far southeast of Scotland. Further south, we will see some sunny spells through the day, but there'll still be some heavy downpours around as the rain builds up here, particularly tonight and tomorrow. The potential for further flooding, a wet zone over North Wales and northern England. As I said, looking a little drier across the southwest of Scotland. A scattering of showers in northern Scotland with that northerly wind bringing a chill. The wet weather this morning should clear away from Northern Ireland, but likely to linger in North Wales, northern England well into this evening, and then we're looking at some heavier bursts of rain developing over the Midlands and southern England and South Wales as we go through the night. Because it's been so wet this week, that is likely to cause some further flooding issues through the night and first thing in the morning. Temperatures just about holding up in double figures tonight, but further north it is turning colder. The northerly winds pushing the rain away, but also introducing a cooler feel. Some good spells of sunshine tomorrow over central and southern Scotland. A much brighter day over northeast England. The rain should also finally clear from southern parts after a wet start. So many areas becoming dry and bright by the afternoon, but also noticeably fresher with the winds coming down from the north. A distinctly cooler feel with temperatures struggling to get into the mid-teens. Many places only 11 or 12 Celsius. Bye for now.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.